If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Scariest things people have experienced but no one believes. True unexplainable paranormal and creepy encounter stories.
Once while driving through the boonies at my college, basically farm country, I was stopped on the side of the road to pee. Looked up, and there was something taller in the corn. This is when the corn was at its height. It turned towards me, my car lights reflecting in its eyes. I immediately ran back to the car and took off, just repeating what the F. I would not have believed it the next day except for one thing. As my friends were asking me what happened, before I said anything, one of them said they knew. He said as we drove away, he saw something standing on the road illuminated by my taillights. My sighting. I don't normally share about stuff like this, hell, I don't really share at all. I'm not that big on believing in cryptids either, but after the one time I've even seen something that I can't explain on my way back to my house in a small town just outside of Pittsburgh, I can't shake the feeling. I was about 12 to 13 when I was walking up one of the steep hills near Sewickley. There weren't a whole lot of cars, and the city planners are dumbasses and didn't put any streetlights along the road. It was maybe 8 to 9 p.m. at night, and I was on my way home from my friend's house. I could barely see anything, and I had to rely on my flashlight and car's headlights. There's a dense forest on either side of the road I took, a small valley on the right and a hill on the left full of trees. There were a few houses here and there, but it wasn't super populated. As I got on the main stretch of the road, I didn't feel very good about walking up it alone at night. Naturally, I was pretty on edge. I started to hear stuff halfway up the road. It's about a mile long, so I booked it up the road to one of the only streetlights. 2/3 RDS of the way up the hill I kept hearing it, this time a hell of a lot closer to me. I looked around and didn't see shit. It was really too dark to see, so I just speed walked up. As I was about to leave the road and head toward an elementary school I used to attend, which had all its lights on, I looked down the valley and saw a tall white figure with no arms, long skinny legs, and a pointed head, almost galloping up the hill. I was horrified, so I took off running. It was probably 50 yards down the hill, and a car came with its high beams on. That was probably the scariest shit I've ever experienced, and I still think about it whenever I walk that steep-ass hill. Not that they don't believe me, but it is wild. One of the houses we lived in after we got married had some type of demon in the attic. The strange part is that it only stayed in the garage. It was converted into a workspace. I never felt weird or scared in any of the rest of the house. Hubby asked me to go out and lock the garage one night. I never made it to that door. I got into the door from the kitchen, but not the outside door. This feeling of overwhelming fear had me running. I saw red eyes in the hole to the attic and refused to go out there at night. So, I was home alone one day, washing dishes, and I felt something weird. I moved my leg just in time to avoid a pan crashing into my leg. It stuck in the door under the sink. I ran to the back of the house until my hubby got home, told him what happened, and he unstuck the pan. He believed me, but we were both shocked because it was the middle of the day. Also, the hole I speak of was directly outside the door of the kitchen. Everyone who stayed past dark had some type of experience there. An entity appeared in our side yard while my ex-girlfriend and I were present. It spoke to us through the open window. It sounded extremely angry and spoke in some kind of alien or demonic language. It sounded like it was speaking while inhaling, too. We both heard it speak. As it spoke, we both had this intense feeling of dread, way worse than the fear of imminent death. Some kind of deep, ingrained primal fear of whatever the duck this thing was. Not only that, as it spoke, our 2 cats were barfing, repeatedly. We left the next day, and when we came back to gather our things to move, we saw that the house next door had been turned to ash. The whole thing burned down, nothing was left. And that apparently happened the day after the encounter. So, yeah, some kind of incredibly evil thing ducked with us, and I haven't been right since then. It was super traumatic. I'm a retired RN, 43 years. When I first worked as a new RN, I was sitting at the nurse's desk charting. Out of the corner of my eye I saw someone peep out of an empty room. Thinking one of my confused patients had gotten out of bed and wandered, I went down the hall to help them back to their room. When I arrived, there was no one there. Not hiding or in the bathroom. So I went back to the desk. Walking past our break room, I saw someone sitting in a chair with their feet propped up. I backstepped, but there was no one in the break room. I got to the desk and sat down stunned. When another nurse, a seasoned nurse with years of experience, came to the desk, she asked me what was wrong. I told her what had just happened. She smiled and said, "That's Barbara. She's a nurse who worked down here for years and died in the room you saw her peeping out from. She still makes rounds on the patients at night. That was my first experience, but over the years I saw many unexplainable things. I believe. Shortly after we were married, my wife and I lived in a duplex. It was actually 2 duplexes side by side. The owner/landlord lives in the other duplex building. A few weeks after we moved in, someone began tapping my foot in the middle of the night, waking me up. For weeks, this occurred every night. Honestly, I initially believed that my wife was moving her leg or engaging in some activity that caused the sheet to shift. Then one night it happened, and when I woke up there was somebody standing there at the foot of the bed. He looked in his mid-50s, kind of chubby, with a green striped shirt. Solid as anyone else. I woke my wife and asked her if she saw him. It seems like a strange question, but I guess I was in disbelief. She was out of the bed in about 1 second, screaming. He just vanished. I asked the landlord about it the next day. He said the previous occupant had been a Vietnam vet. He said that apparently the previous occupant and another soldier woke each other by tapping on the foot to avoid getting hit or stabbed while waking up from a dead sleep. He let us out of our lease, and we moved out a couple of days later. I stayed with my in-laws and never slept there again. I'm sure my new in-laws wondered what their daughter got herself into. One of my friends used to live really close to a cemetery. Like within a street away. You could walk there one night. My husband and I drove by to pick something up, and we were leaving. We had gotten to the corner of my friend's road and saw someone walking. It was starting to rain, and so we pulled over to ask if they were okay. They acted like they couldn't hear us and just kept walking. We asked again in case they really didn't hear us because it started to storm with lightning and thunder. They looked up and flat disappeared into thin air right in front of us. Scared the duck out of both me and my husband. My husband's only reaction was nope. Not today. Time to go home. Agreed. I feel like no one believes me. My brother died by suicide in Jan. Long story short, I'm moving into his paid-off condo, but I'm putting in new floors and painting first. I work there evenings and nights, and things have fallen that shouldn't. I assume it's him and talk to him when I'm there. Last night I was bent over painting window trim, and as I stood up, I felt a poke in my back, and my shirt came up a little where I was poked. It felt like I hit a broom handle or something, and I thought that I ran into something because the place is a disaster right now. I turned around, and there's nothing near me. The couch was like 3 feet away. I didn't bump into anything. Assuming it was my brother, I'm a little concerned since I'll be moving in there. I want to sense his presence, but I can't allow him to knock things off tables, poke us, or turn off lights when we move in. Guess I just had to tell someone because my friends and family think I went crazy. I was playing Ding Dong Ditch when I was a kid, maybe 14 years old. Since it was in New England, the houses were very old. We targeted one house that was built in the early 1700s. Knocked on the door, then ran to the side of the property and hid behind a pile of dirt, waiting for someone to come. That's when I noticed in the 3rd floor window a young girl standing there staring down at us. I pointed it out to my friend, and we were frozen because we thought we were caught. That's when we noticed she wasn't moving whatsoever. She just stood there staring at us for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. It was so long that we started to think it might be something else, like a coat hanging in the window. She just looked like a young girl from a distance because she didn't move a muscle. That is until she just turned and walked away from the window. It was the weirdest thing. The girl looked to be maybe 5 years old, with a white gown on and long dark hair. It was very late, maybe 1 to 2 a.m., and only an old couple lived in the house, which made it all so much more strange. To this day I'm certain it was a ghost. I saw my friend as a ghost. Nobody believed me, but I made it clear to leave me alone. We were BFFs at 5, as well as neighbors. One day, she couldn't play, she had died. When I was about 8, I saw her when she was 5. I had gone to the bathroom, washed my hands, turned off the light, and went to grab the door handle. My hand couldn't find it. I saw a reflection in the mirror and turned around. It was her. Just standing there. I tore out of the bathroom and never looked back. I'm 39 and will still sleep with a nightlight. I never turn off lights until I have a door open. My parents took me to counselors who tried to convince me that my fears were all in my head, suggesting I was avoiding the pain of a death from my past and my parents' divorce, while also referencing a light under the door that somehow reflected onto her. Every time a person close to me dies, I pray to them and tell them I love them, but for all that's holy, don't revisit me. I was staying up past my bedtime one night playing Nintendogs on my DS. My bedroom door was open just a little bit, enough to let the hallway light in. The rest of my room was in shadow, but there was enough to make out features on the wall and my decorations and toys. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall black shadow, much darker than the darkness of the room, and it was hovering about a foot off the ground. It looked like someone wearing a robe with the hood up. It came in through the crack in my door and glided across the room and stopped. I froze and didn't move a muscle. The shadow then turned its head to look at me fully, and I just felt dread wash over me, and it felt like someone injected cold water into my veins. I have never screamed so loud in my life. I hid under the blankets and screamed and cried for my mom. I was like 11 when this happened. It felt like an eternity before my mom came upstairs to ask what was wrong, and she didn't believe me when I told her what I saw. I was so shaken up that I had to sleep downstairs in the living room with all of the lights on for the next few nights. I still felt like I was being watched, but I never saw such a clear figure like that again in my house. Went camping with 2 of my friends. We sometimes do ghost huntings for fun, with a spirit box and an EMF. But that day we had no activity. So we just enjoyed the night and went to sleep. At like 2 to 3 in the morning, I was woken up by the sound of wings on top of our tent, like a bird just flew away, and after like 1 minute, I started to hear a feminine voice singing from the forest. I thought I was going insane, so I woke my friend up to see if he heard it too. He just froze and didn't say a word. Then woke up the second guy. He just froze too, listening to the singing. I tried to find an explanation, but there was no car, no footsteps, just the eerie humming. The humming wasn't still, it was moving, coming closer or farther from our tent. It kind of went down the hill and into the forest again, stopping after. That was ducking scary, but everyone I tell this to says I was on shrooms. No one believes me. I have seen ghosts and demons since I was 7 years old. While growing up I used to walk back and forth to the library, and on the way I would always come across this abandoned home. I never walked by it and always was on the other side of the street. It creeped me out. Sometimes I would see things move in the windows. To make a long story short, I went back 1 year with a significant other. We brought one of those meters that measure energy fields and whatnot. I forget what it's called. Essentially we were ghost hunting. I saw a dark figure in the window, and he asked me to go to it. I said no. We haven't gone back since. My story is about the haunted ranch house where my family lived when I was 12 years old, around 1998. For mine and my sister's bedroom to create the appearance of a wall between it and the living room. We were given a large wardrobe/closet that you could insert into a space of equal size. But our parents put it against the wall kind of like an L shape with the closet part facing the living area for winter coats or whatnot. On the opposite side, the side that would have been the exterior of the closet was the head of our full bed that my sister and I shared. That night it was fall, and the basement was chilly, as basements tend to be. Nothing worth anything had taken place before bedtime. We crawl into bed and are lying there when we start to hear scuffling on the cement floor. Like someone walking around but with a terrible gait, how they walk, it sounded like someone who doesn't pick up their feet when they walk. Immediately we are petrified. We slept and lived alone downstairs, and the only entrance is the door at the top of the stairs that run the left length of our room essentially. Windows only open 30 degrees. And there is nowhere to hide for an intruder. Because of past events, we knew this was supernatural. Now, one of the worst feelings in the world as a human being is going upstairs thinking something is behind you. And we both couldn't be in front. Plus our dad was a major a-hole, and we would have gotten knocked around for going up there after bedtime. So we lay there under our covers. Eventually we could hear breathing like labored breathing. The footsteps continued but would never come past that makeshift wall. We also slept in complete darkness, as we weren't allowed night lights, and the lights were hanging from the ceiling with drawstrings, and the nearest one was in the living room. With the exception of the light at the bottom of the stairs controlled by a switch at the top of the stairs. That light turns on. We're still under our covers. We then hear what sounds like someone stepping on the old ratty couch in the living room. We had to stand on the couch to open that window. That window slams open, 30 degrees, it opened with such force it shattered. The light stays on, and we stay under the covers. But it's completely quiet now. It stays quiet for some time, to the point we actually start to doze off. When each of us exclaims, "What?" we each heard the other's voice in a whisper say the other's name right in our ear. We both rocked a beating from our dad and went upstairs and tried to sleep on our little sister's bedroom floor. When we lay on the floor, we could hear into the basement, and it was like 100 people were down there talking. We noped off the floor and crawled into their beds. We had to tell our mom there was no way we could sleep down there. Come to find out, one time she was sleeping down there when my sister had her tonsils out, and she had woken up to a man standing over her. So luckily she believed us and had told our dad of some other things, and they allowed us to sleep up on the floor. We still had to be down there. Unfortunately we didn't have great parents, and we were locked downstairs 24/7 except for school and meal times, but in their defense, they did not make us sleep down there any longer. When I was visiting Rochester Castle in Kent, the chapel had a really oppressive atmosphere, and when you walked in, it was like walking up to a fridge. I felt a strong sense of evil there. It was like all the life had been sucked out of there. But after a few seconds of that feeling, the temperature rose and never returned to normal. When I tell people, they don't believe me, as it's not been recorded by anyone else. I was a kid. I saw my brother get out of bed at 3 a.m., open the bedroom door, and head to the bathroom down the hall. A few minutes later I hear someone in the hallway. Then I look over and see my brother in his bed asleep. So I walk to the door, and I peek my head around the corner down the hallway. I'm instantly frozen in fear. I see a very tall, large cloaked figure descending down the stairs into the sunken family room, and it looks back at me while doing so. I literally pissed myself. I was 10 years old. My mom woke up to me crying uncontrollably, and it took hours to console me and get me back to sleep. It was not a dream. I was wide awake and covered in piss. Years later we found out that the house and property had an undisclosed suicide from the prior owners. Their son ended himself in the bedroom that my brother and I shared. I have no idea what that figure was to this day. It just felt evil to me. Kids see and know stuff that adults just can't sometimes. Anywho, I never tell people this. They just dismiss it, and I probably would too if it hadn't happened to me. I'm still cynical. I've said this before, but everyone thinks it's a fake pasta or something. I can only swear it's true. I was engaged in night fishing in the UK, and the boat was quite small. Had a cabin up front, with a wheel, and a large box in the center that had equipment in it. 4 people would have filled the boat pretty well. Anyway, I'm about a mile offshore, sitting on the port side prepping my fishing rod. It's a calm and cool night. Moon up and barely any water movement. Suddenly I hear a huge splash behind me, starboard side, and it was so loud I jumped up and went around to look, thinking that maybe a large fish was chilling back there. Nope. Floating in the water right next to my boat was a dead woman. She was naked, but there were no obvious signs of foul play, such as being tied up or having clear injuries. She didn't look decomposed or like she'd been in the water long. I jumped back in panic, and as my mind was racing through what I needed to do, I looked down and saw wet boot prints on the deck. Like, fresh, wet prints. They were not made by me, as I was wearing trainers, and my feet were not wet at all. I was in a blind panic and looking around, but the boat was too small for someone to be hiding there. Equally, I'd have obviously noticed a dead body on board. I ran to the wheelhouse and tore the duck out of there. On reflection I should have done something with the body, but I was too terrified to think straight. I got back to land and immediately rang 999 and told them about the body, and it all kicked off from there. Anyway, long story short, it took ages to convince people I had nothing to do with the body, all fine in the end, and the woman was duly retrieved and taken away. I heard nothing else about it and never had any follow-up or closure. I sold the boat not long after, and I haven't been out fishing since. I'll never know where that body came from, if it fell from my boat, or whose ducking shoe prints those were. Terrified me. When I was a teenager, maybe about 14, I was at home with my sister, and we had 2 friends over. We lived in a normal apartment complex, with no history of anything as far as I know. I went into my room to retrieve something without turning the lights on, as I was just grabbing something quickly. As I was exiting, I very clearly heard someone or something say my name, right into my left ear. Like a loud whisper. I freaked and ran out of the room. There was no one in my room. My 2 friends and sister were in the living room. I can't remember what their reactions were when I told them, but when I told my mom about it, she's very religious, she just told me that it was God. I honestly don't think she or anyone else believed me, but I remember what I heard. That shit was clear as day. And to this day, I still can't explain what it was. I used to work in a large warehouse where ambulances were built. There is a small, dark, and creepy storage room located at the back of the warehouse, so I always go straight for the lights before doing anything. While I was back there doing inventory on various electrical components, a man I had never seen before appeared in the doorway and told me, "Go get the boss's son's name," while staring blankly at me. As a 16-year-old, I simply said okay and attempted to walk past him, having to squeeze between him and the doorframe to exit the room. I walked all the way to the front of the building and informed my manager, who then asked me who that person was. He told me nobody should be back there at all, so I, and a few other employees scoured the whole building looking for this person, but they were no longer there. There were no other ways a person could have left the building without anyone knowing. About a week later, I spoke with the boss about the incident, describing the person's appearance and what he had said. The boss appeared pale for a moment and repeatedly insisted that I was lying. At this point I was upset because he scared me back there and nobody believed me that it happened. Boss pulls out a photo album and asks me if anyone is in this picture. So I told him, yeah, it's the guy standing next to the boss's son's name. There were lots of people in this album, but I recognized him immediately, and he said, really? Well, he was my son's best friend. He took his own life a few years ago on Christmas Eve. It stuck with me. So I'm 18 right now, but 5 years ago when I was 13, I was hanging out with a bunch of my friends and my younger brother. A few of my friends and I decided to go for a walk in our gated community late at night because it was safe, but not even a few minutes into the walk, we saw 3 lights shining in the night sky. At first we all thought it was an airplane because we later saw a few windows on the side of the structure or object, but we later ran inside immediately after it started spinning in a sense. It turned very quickly and had windows on every side of it. It had this circular shape with the 3 lights we had seen previously on the bottom, until it eventually just left, like vanished. We all ran inside and told my parents because we knew what we saw. They obviously didn't believe us. No one except for this friend group of mine believes us to this day. I still think about it every day, wondering what it could have been, and I'm still very haunted. I was 7, and my mom was looking at a house that was for sale. It was a nice house that was on a slight incline in the city, NY. I was acting up, touching everything, and messing with the toilets, so my mom sent me to sit in the car, which was in her line of sight. I sat in her car, feeling extremely bored, when I noticed a stick-like object, since my mom drove a stick shift, and pulled it all the way towards me. As I'm sitting there, I feel the car start to roll back, slowly at first. The car starts to pick up momentum, and before I knew it, I was about to roll across a 4-lane busy street that was across from some grass. I was literally rolling across the street watching all these cars swerve/beep to keep from hitting me. I literally thought I was going to die. The car finally hits the grass, and I open my eyes. I'm sitting there in pure shock. About 30 seconds pass, and I look over and see the passenger door open and a hand reaching into the car. I will never forget this. I saw an older white male in a cowboy hat, and he was speaking to me, but I didn't see his mouth open. He told me I was going to be okay and asked where my mom was. So, I told him that she was across the street in the big blue house. At this point, I'm holding his hand and looking up at him as he guides me across the street to get to the house. I remember it was a sunny/busy day. I don't know how else to describe this, but it was like the earth was on mute, and I couldn't hear anything. I was still looking up at him when all of a sudden it was like the volume was turned back on and all the sounds came back in at once. I'm now in front of the big blue house, and my mom is hysterical, screaming and crying. Are you okay? I thought you were going to die. Why did you cross the street by yourself? Why didn't you listen to me? I'm so glad you're okay. Apparently my mom was looking at some paperwork, which took her attention away from me in the car, and when she finally looked, I was crossing the busy street by myself. She ran out to get to me but didn't want to startle and scare me and have me get hit by a car, so she was trying to find the right opportunity to get to me. She was yelling at the cars, trying to make them stop. I looked at her and said, "Mom, I didn't cross the street by myself, the man in the cowboy hat helped me across." She assured me there was no man in a cowboy hat. To this day, I know I saw him and that he saved my life. He was most definitely an angel. My father worked for one of those companies that had picnics every summer. One year, my siblings, a few other kids at the picnic, and I went on a little nature walk. I couldn't have been more than 10, 11 years old. I thought I had a good grasp of which way we came from, but soon enough, we were lost. Really lost, deep in the woods. So, we're wandering around for who knows how long, and most everyone in the group was crying because we were so screwed, and how could no one be looking for us? Eventually, my brother suggested trying to follow the barking of a dog in the distance. We walked through thickets, across waist-deep swampland, and fed too many mosquitoes. After what felt like forever, we found a wooden fence that ended up being the edge of this woman's property. The dog we'd followed was enclosed in the fenced-in area. I explained how we were lost and had come from a picnic somewhere on the other side of the woods. She pushed everyone into her car and drove several miles down the road to the state forest, where the picnic was being held. I have never been so scared or so relieved. Turns out we'd been gone for more than 4 hours. And as far as I know, none of the parents even knew we were gone. Ducking 80s parenting. It was a Saturday, I don't remember the exact date, it's been about 3 years since that event. Well, on Saturdays I usually watch movies all night. That day he stayed at my house, I live with my parents, and my brother and sister-in-law lived with us at that time. Then my brother's in-laws arrived to stay that day. They slept in my room, my nephew, who was barely 4 or 5 months old, in the other room with my brother and sister-in-law, and in the third room, my parents. I was in the living room lying on a cot watching TV. Around 1 a.m. I fell into a very deep sleep. I couldn't resist, and I was forced to turn off the TV and go to sleep. By the time I opened my eyes, the first thing I realized was that I couldn't get up from the cot. I couldn't move except from the neck up or head, and I could move my eyes. I looked towards the window, and a bright glow came through it, a golden light. Then I looked upwards. When I was lying down and looking up, I could obviously see what was behind me. I saw 3 tall, gray, skinny beings with big eyes. At that moment I panicked and quickly changed my gaze to my feet. Still scared, I calmed down for a few seconds and convinced myself that panic would not solve anything. I told myself that it would be useless to feel afraid in that situation, so I looked up, looked into their eyes, and asked them the only questions that came to mind at that moment, with a trembling voice. I asked them what they wanted and what they were looking for. The creatures were staring at me, directly into my eyes. There was silence for a few seconds. I was afraid they would talk to me, considering they are beings from another world, and I wasn't prepared for that situation. So, I blinked, and when I did, the grays had disappeared. It felt as if time had paused. In reality, that blink might have lasted longer, allowing them to leave without my noticing. I couldn't move. I was in shock. I didn't even go outside to see the sky. I couldn't have. I went to the refrigerator, had a glass of water, and still with all that in mind and with more questions than answers, I went to sleep. Franklin, North Carolina. Top of a mountain at my friend's cabin. Nighttime, bright moon. I'm sitting on the porch with my dogs having a beer. All of a sudden every dog, including mine, and coyote within the 3 mountains around me started going absolutely nuts. Howling and barking like crazy. Then, they all just stopped, like at once. As soon as that happened, something flew very low over the house. It was quiet except for a vibrating hum. It had no lights, not one that I saw. It was big, it blocked the moonlight out over the house. It shook the trees lightly and the house as it went over. It was not fast but moving swiftly enough. As quickly as it came, it was gone. Ran inside to my friend's bedroom, and she was completely oblivious. She looked on a flight tracking site, and nothing flew over. She thought I was nuts. Every hair on my body is standing on end just typing this. About 2 weeks ago, I heard my own voice say my name outside in the middle of the night. I dismissed it, but after a few nights of it, I started spending time in a different room. I kept hearing it. Sometimes loud, sometimes soft, calling out or urgent sounding. On the 5th night I was watching TV with my wife, and she heard it. When I didn't react and she heard it again, she panicked. We live in a very remote area, have no neighbors, and have numerous security cameras. Nothing was setting off the cameras, and it was definitely my voice. Others said it's a mimic, and I should completely ignore it, and then it will go away. Tonight is night 15, and I was setting up my new tablet half an hour ago when a full glass of Sprite I just poured and left on the table launched 8 feet across the room, hit me in the mouth, and spilled all over my new tablet. I was frantically wiping off the tablet with paper towels and checking my mouth for blood, and outside my window I heard my voice call out my name loud, very frustrated, and angry sounding. I don't know what to do or think about any of it. It's been more than 2 weeks, every night, multiple times. It just started out of nowhere, and now I actually got hurt by it. My new tablet is probably ruined, and I saw it happen before my eyes, even though it isn't possible. I started seeing and hearing dead people at around 5 years old and saw 2 Native Americans in full war gear glaring at me through the bathroom window. I knew they wanted to end me. I tried to tell my sister, who brushed me off, so when I saw others, I didn't tell anybody. The next bad one was when I was 10 years old, and my room was on the 2nd floor. I was in bed and started hearing murmuring and groaning that sounded like a lot of people at once, so I peeked out my window, and about 8 to 10 dead were milling around the light pole in our yard. We had an acre, they were in various stages of decomp, and there were white, black, and native people out there. One woman looked up suddenly and saw me and started pointing and shuffling towards the house with the others following. I was frozen in terror and dropped back into bed and shut them out, which actually worked. There was something supernatural in or around that house almost every day, and my family treated me like I was over-imaginative and silly. I'm 65 now and have learned to control the visitors but absolutely refuse to visit any place haunted. I've seen too much. I remember one of my experiences. Several years back, around 9 to 10 p.m., I was alone in my bedroom, changing my shirt. My bedroom door was left slightly open. As I was changing, from the side of my eye, I could see my bedroom door very gradually opening. From the side of my eye, I saw a person's head very slowly peeking through. I immediately turned to look, and I see the face of a woman, which I've never seen before. Her face was fully pale white, her hair was a midnight black, and she was rather tall and willowy. The moment I locked eyes with her, in just a moment, she immediately pulled her head back. I rushed toward my bedroom door, yet once there, I found no one standing there, looked through the hallway leading to my bedroom, and it was completely empty. I walked through, which led to a living hall. Some of my family members were sitting there talking and watching TV. I asked them, "Did any of you see someone pass through the hallway?" They looked at me strangely and replied, "No." Then I asked, "Did anyone open my bedroom door by any chance?" And they responded, "No." Why? Did something happen? Here I just stood there and tried my best to brush it off. In another instance, not far from this occurrence, once I was asleep in my bedroom at night, I felt the bed shaking, a common occurrence, which I tend to try my best to ignore. However, during that specific night, I felt a really sharp, excruciating pain in my shoulder that lasted for several seconds. During the morning time, I touched my shoulder, but the pain was gone, and I thought to myself that that was a really strange dream. After a light breakfast, I wanted to take a shower. Once I was in my bathroom, I took my shirt off, and in the large bathroom mirror, I noticed something peculiar on one of my shoulders. I crept closer to the mirror and saw a huge purple/bluish bruise on my shoulder. And upon closer inspection, I could see the imprint of teeth, and I quickly realized that this is a bite mark. And realized this was the source of the excruciating pain I felt when I was sleeping the previous night. The strange thing is that I sleep alone in my bedroom, and the door is always locked. So hear me out. Saw a figure of my mom in our garden last week picking up fall fruit from the ground, which she usually does when our fruit trees bear fruit. Looked like her. Exactly like her. The problem is, she was at work the entire day, and when I looked closer to investigate, it was gone. And no, it wasn't a neighbor or a reflection. It was her. Even now, a while after it happened, I'm still pretty sure I saw some kind of shapeshifter or something else supernatural. It was so damn real, and I swear I'm not on drugs or smoking anything. Like it felt so real that I had to look if she came home early from work, and then I sat down for like 15 minutes and questioned it so bad. Mom laughed it off when I told her. Brother doesn't care. Believe me or not, that was creepy as hell. I lived in the same mountains in a small town where everyone knew each other my whole life. We are referring to a town with fewer than 200 residents and no traffic signals. Everyone is familiar with you, your middle name, and whether you attended church that Sunday. After high school I moved an hour away to a bigger city but would take frequent trips up to visit my family and was in an extremely abusive relationship at the time. Finally one night I got the courage to leave the guy I had been with and move back home. This country road I knew like the back of my hand. I learned to drive on it and took the school bus twice a day for 4 years. There's also zero cell service. I'm headed towards home, and I see a pickup truck wedged in a hole. Since it's still light out and the driver is a woman, I pull over to see if I can help or give her a ride home, as it's likely that we know each other well if we're both on this road. Another truck pulls over with a couple inside, and they greet me by name. After confirming that I will give the pickup driver a ride since she is closer to my side of the mountain, the couple leaves. The woman gets in my passenger seat and starts sobbing, saying I know some of her family and that she's running away from a man who hurt her physically. I'm coincidentally doing the same thing at that very moment, so I feel for her and ask her if the place I'm about to take her is safe. She then asks me to head in the direction of another small mountain community not that far away, and it's starting to get dark. I don't remember a lot after that, just driving and feeling like I was never going to get there. And then all of a sudden there were police lights behind me, and I pulled over, and they asked me questions about the woman, and I said I didn't personally know her but may go to school with her granddaughter and was just trying to give her a ride home. They said that they would handle it from there, and she went with them. The very next day, I realized that she had left her pickup keys in my cup holder, so I told my mom the story of what had happened and asked if we could get them back to her family because I didn't want her to be in trouble since the woman kept repeating that over and over. My mom took the keys from me and told me that she would handle it, so I trusted her to do that. Spoke to the granddaughter a few days later and told her that I hoped that her grandma was doing okay. I mentioned my concern about how the truck was wedged in the hole and that the police had ensured her grandma got home safely that night. She didn't even know who I was talking about. No one did. No one could even identify the couple who called me by name before leaving the scene. Almost like it never even happened. Something is following me and my friend. I am a 21-year-old female living in the state of Florida, and as of late strange things have been happening to me and my friend. It started a few weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of whistling. It sounded like it was right outside my window. I live in a one-room apartment with only one window. I could see the outline of someone. I went to go peek out my window and found that there was no one there. I went outside and walked all the way around my apartment buildings, and I couldn't find a single person outside. The whistling was loud too. It sounded like whoever was doing it was standing right in front of my door. This has been happening every few nights between 10 p.m. EST and 3 a.m. EST. As more nights go by, I hear the whistling moving around the outside of my apartment. I can even hear it through the walls of my apartment as if it were in the room next to me. But it continues to circle nonstop back around to my front door. I can't figure out exactly what the song is that's being whistled. I do get the feeling that I'm safe as long as I don't leave my apartment. Here is where my friend comes in. He lives in Florida as well but lives 600-ish miles south of me in a much larger city. During the daytime he has been hearing the sound of a woman humming when alone. It seems to be coming from places up high, like a tree or a rooftop. He says he keeps getting the feeling of being watched. The freaky thing is that the humming is in the same tune as the whistling I'm hearing at night. I did not say anything to him about the tune of the whistling until he first mentioned the humming and copied the tune he heard. After a bit of observation we realized we are hearing it at separate times. If he hears humming during the day, I will hear the whistling at night, and vice versa. Leading us to think they could be connected. My friend and I are super close and talk every single day. We used to even live together. I guess I'm sharing this to see if anyone has any ideas what this could be. Is it paranormal? Maybe a cryptid native to Florida or something? I'd even take a lead from an SCP at this rate. I don't directly believe in any of that stuff, but it could be someone trying to copy a story or legend. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. I was home, Ma was asleep. Home is a rural trailer on 5 acres. We kept chickens at the time, and due to a cataclysmic drought that was causing the coyotes to get desperate. It was becoming a nightly thing where I'd have to deal with them. My little dog would start to go nuts and wake me up. I'd grab my Beretta and go fire a shot into the dark in the general direction of the chicken coop. It would make the coyotes scatter, and they usually wouldn't try again that night. The chicken coop was on the very edge of the range of the porch light, about 50 feet away across the driveway. One night, my dog goes crazy like usual. I grab my gun like usual. I flick on the porch light and aim. I don't see the silhouettes of coyotes stalking around in the darkness. I see a canine the size of a donkey actively prying one of the wall panels off the coop. The creature's head was fully inside the coop. I fired a full magazine of 9mm FMJ ammunition at it. 7 rounds. It clearly felt it, but it didn't drop it either. It started to flail around as it tried to pull its head out of the coop. I turned around and ran back inside to grab another mag. At the same time, Ma is coming out of her room with her .38 revolver in hand. I screamed something along the lines of "There's a werewolf outside" as I slammed the next mag into my pistol and went back outside. The giant dog was gone. The only evidence of it was a blood trail that abruptly ended about a quarter mile away that I tracked the next day. That, and the 3 dead chickens. I swear this is 100% true and still scares me to this day. When I was 17 or 18, but it has been nearly 10 years. My parents possessed approximately 10 acres in a rural area adjacent to a national forest. During the summer we had a huge problem with armadillos getting into our pool and digging around the irrigation of our house. My father had a simple solution, a 12-gauge SWAT-style shotgun. This shotgun held 8 rounds and had a flashlight mounted on the side as well as having a holder on the side of the gun that held 6 more rounds. The point is this thing was overkill. Every night in late spring/early summer my job was to walk around the house at least twice, usually around 9 and 11. So one night my parents were out, and my brother was in the living room watching TV. During my 9 p.m. round I kept feeling like I was being watched but never saw anything. So during my 11 p.m. walk around, I grabbed a second larger flashlight that was much brighter. The entire time I felt like I was being watched. Every hair on my body was on end. Just as I came around the side of the house to head back in, I felt my entire body go ice cold. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and my hands were shaking. I have hunted hogs in the dark and been stalked by a mountain lion, and nothing came close to the terror I felt. I swung the flashlight towards the tree line of the national forest, about 50 yards, and saw these 2 burning red eyes staring at me. They were about 4 feet off the ground and spaced way too far apart to be any animal native to where I live. I dropped the larger flashlight and raised the shotgun, firing once. This is usually enough to scare the dead, much less anything alive, as the boom and flash of the gun are thunderous, to say the least. But somehow, through the ringing in my ears from the blast, I hear this sound. I call it a growl only because I have nothing else to compare it to, but I felt this growl in my bones. I proceeded to unleash every round I had. 8 rounds of buckshot, and the eyes are still staring at me. I flipped the shotgun over and started to reload, keeping the muzzle pointed at the eyes and slowly walking backwards. The eyes seemed to almost lazily begin moving towards me. I slammed the last round in, and by now the eyes and what I can only describe as a massive shadow are in the open, only 30 yards away. I began firing again, not sure what else to do as I kept backing up. I finally reached the door, and after firing the last shot, I hurled myself inside and kicked on the floodlights mounted to the back of our house. These lights are huge and make the backyard look like daytime. The eyes vanished as soon as the lights came on, followed only by a low angry growl. I threw on every exterior light on the house as the feeling of being watched slowly faded away. The craziest part? My brother was still watching TV and hadn't heard 14 rounds of buckshot go off just on the other side of the window he was sitting next to. The next morning, after not sleeping at all, I went outside, and the flashlight I dropped was crushed like a truck had run over it. There were no other signs anything had happened. A few weeks later, a neighbor had their guard dog, a Great Pyrenees, torn to shreds about half a mile away. After that, nothing. I know this story sounds crazy, and I feel crazy for it, but it happened. That night is burned into my mind, and even sitting here typing this, I get chills. Despite being a skeptic and having witnessed the first sighting, no one believes me. It was clear as day. I've always had weird feelings of being watched, etc. I've never seen anything or anyone before. Basically, it went like this. At the Labor Day cookout, I needed to run down to the basement to grab more beers from the fridge. It's not a creepy basement, it's not finished, but there is a half bath, a laundry area where the fridge is, and a side room that will soon be renovated into a bar. That's where I saw him. I'd been down that basement a number of times to use said bathroom or go to the fridge, so I had zero hesitation being down there at night with the lights on. Across from the fridge is the door to the soon-to-be bar. It has a wooden frame, but the middle is glass, so there was a reflection. As I walked by, I saw my reflection walking towards the fridge, and joining me in the reflection, clear as day, was a teenage/early 20s male. I noticed him immediately because he was sprinting by me in the reflection wearing what looked like a basketball jersey and possibly basketball shorts. I just vividly remember the loose look of the jersey on his slim, athletic build. What's weirder about this was that it didn't cause me to react as expected. I didn't feel uneasy or scared. In fact, I still reached for the fridge, grabbed the beers, looked back to the reflection, nothing there, and headed back upstairs. Of course, I told everyone what I had just seen, and immediately everyone shut it down. The biggest skeptic who has fiercely denied I saw a ghost is my boyfriend. No one wants to listen to or believe me. It was quick, it wasn't frightening, but it was so real to me. I've never been one to hallucinate, even with a few in me. I also have an idea of who it was, which would explain the comforting feeling, but it's too touchy of a subject to bring up to the people who were there. Anyways, thanks for listening if you did. I just needed to get this out there and maybe find someone to talk to about my first sighting. Either way, if it is who I thought, I'm happy he's running happily in the afterlife watching his family. When I was 12, my mother found a new partner and decided we should move from our apartment to a new home. The first time we set foot in our new home, the previous tenant was still living there. He was a bit of an oddball. A guy in his 50s with a stereotypical hippie look, long hair, painted nails, etc. Despite his odd appearance, he was a very intelligent person who taught Latin at our local high school. However, there were rumors about his unusual behavior there, and he was not particularly popular among parents. The first strange thing we noticed was that the house was a complete mess, with garbage visible everywhere and filled with empty beer bottles and bags that likely once contained weed. The second weird thing was he owned a lot of women's lingerie even though he was single. The third weird thing was this house was filled with dolls, like 30 centimeters big nude dolls. They were everywhere, there were at least hundreds of them, even on the staircase and next to his bed. My parents shrugged off the weirdness, laughed about it, and said they still wanted to rent the house and would take care of any issues. The previous tenant was moving because he bought a house down the street. When we started to refurbish the house, the neighbors were very pleased and told us the guy really had strange behaviors. He would dance completely nude in the garden at night and engage in other unusual behaviors. Now after we moved, we started to notice funny things. When we were not at the house, the TV would turn on. Of course, I was the one to blame. We had a Yorkshire Terrier that would get rage fits at night, and the dog would start to bark at the corner of the living room like his life depended on it. There was this one room that we didn't use a lot, crappy man cave/music room, but every single time I went in, I felt uneasy and watched. When I walked the stairs, I had the same feeling of being watched and even being followed, Every time I got a huge shiver down my spine. At one point lamps actually started to explode, like they would burst without an obvious reason for this to happen. At this point, my parents were making jokes about the haunted nature of the place. The following thing is the most chilling experience I had during the 2 to 3 years we lived there, and after this incident I refused to stay at home alone anymore. I was alone in the house, and I was in my room. I was listening to an MP3 player that was connected to an external speaker with a 3.5mm audio jack. At some point I started to hear some very faint whispering in the song I was listening to, can't recall the song. I noticed and got curious, so I started to listen more carefully. I pressed the next button, and the following song began playing while the whispering continued. Now I got really curious and again pressed next, and the whispering persisted. I pressed the pause button, and the whispering persisted. Now I'm shocked, and I start to play with the audio levels, but the voices are too faint to actually hear what is being said. At this point I got mad, and I pulled out the audio jack from the MP3 player, and you guessed it, the voices were still there. Now I'm really starting to freak out, and I pull the power cable. The voices are finally gone. Back to the previous tenant I described in the beginning of my story. When he moved out to the house down the street, the guy only lived for 6 months, he ended himself in his new house. All this happened 20 years ago, and to this day I still don't know what to think about this whole situation. The only thing I do know is it still scares me, and I wish I had never encountered any of this. I'm not sure if ghosts are real or not, but after this encounter, I do keep an open mind when it comes to these things. My gut says this guy fooled around with some bad things, and in the end it got him killed, and we were collateral damage. I talked to the alternate version of my family, and no one believes me. Around 8 or 9 years ago, I was hanging out at my old house, chowing down on some food my mom cooked for me. It was pretty early, like around 11 a.m., so my big brother was at school, and my dad was at work. After I finished eating what my mom prepared for me, the kitchen/home phone started ringing, and I told my mom before she went upstairs to her room. She told me not to answer it. But as soon as she was out of sight, I just couldn't resist picking it up to see who was calling us. When I picked up the call, it was my mom's voice on the other end saying, "Hey, is this Christina?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" We had a whole chat, just like we were in the same room. But here's the weird part, my real mom was still upstairs, not on the phone with me. And while I was talking to her, I could hear my dad, who was at work, chatting with her too. I asked my mom if it was Dad, and she said it was. I even asked if I could talk to him, and she passed the phone to him. I was freaked out but curious, so I asked him what he was up to. He said he was making cereal in the kitchen. The crazy thing was, I was also in the kitchen on the phone with them. This was getting seriously weird. I started getting suspicious that my parents were playing a prank, so I thought, let's see what happens if I ask to talk to my brother. When my dad handed the phone to my presumed brother, I became uneasy and ended the call. But then, the phone started ringing again, and I gave in and answered. They were asking why I hung up, and I came up with a lame excuse about needing to go to the bathroom. I asked to talk to Christina, which was actually me, and things got super eerie. I heard my own voice talking to me, and it was just too overwhelming. I ended the call. They kept calling a few more times, but I ignored them. Honestly, to this day, I'm still scratching my head over what went down. I've tried looking for answers and people who've been through similar stuff, but I haven't found anything that clicks. My AI buddy suggested that I might have confused my memory with a wild dream, but I am confident that what I experienced was completely real. If anyone out there has a clue or went through something like this, help a confused soul out. If you have any advice or have experienced something similar, please let me know. I'm trying to find answers. I saw a ghost when I was 16, and I've never been able to forget the moment. My mom and I had just moved into a home she had bought. The house was in fair condition and wasn't poor, but there was always a feeling of being watched. I know that's, like, cliché, but it's honestly how I felt. I would always have a bad vibe in the room I would stay in and could never sleep soundly. One night, I just could not fall asleep. I kept feeling uneasy with the lights off, and I just grabbed my pillow and blanket and went to my mom's room. When I lay down, I saw that I was followed by something in a dark black cloak with a pale face, but it wasn't like a mask, it just looked pale, with no eyes, just black sockets, and it literally sank slowly down until I could not see it anymore. It was shocking, and I've always felt uneasy about it. I don't know if anyone has experienced any of the sorts, but it is still chilling to me to this day. My mom and I moved shortly after because I wasn't the only one who saw it. My grandmother and my mom ended up seeing it too. This is not a fake story, this legitimately happened to me, and I wanted to share it with the community. No one believes me. In 2009, I was living in an apartment with my boyfriend at the time and a roommate. My boyfriend had a job at a pub, closing shift. I was going to culinary school and had to be up at 4, so I was always in bed early. I would plug in this string of soft lights so he would be able to see when he got home without waking me up. I am also incredibly blind without my contacts or glasses. I'm talking faded color blobs as my normal vision. I had gone to bed like normal and was woken up by the sound of my bedroom door shutting. And I know I was awake because I couldn't see well. I can see perfectly in my dreams and nightmares. I rolled over to face the door and saw someone standing there with their hand still on the doorknob. I thought it was my boyfriend at the time even though I couldn't make out any features whatsoever. I could see the light from the living room under the door, and I could hear the TV on and my roommate's voice. I propped myself up on my elbow and asked how his night at work was. He didn't respond. I start to get confused as he hasn't moved or said anything. And then he rippled. Like a wave from the top down, and once that ripple got to my eye level, I felt this intense fear deep in my chest. I screamed and shoved myself backwards in bed. The person disappeared when my boyfriend, roommate, and her boyfriend all came running into my room. A friend told me somebody sent that thing to me as a message. Has anyone else experienced something like this? It still bothers me. The trail where the trees haunted me. Okay, so I was walking through a park and saw a little trail going off the path that I had never seen before. Something lured me to this path, and it was evil. I walked towards it and realized that it was not, in fact, a dead end, but it turns right at 90 degrees, and it goes from an open view of luscious tall grass to a canopy of trees over a 3-meter wide grass path. I keep walking, and for whatever reason, I start thinking about the devil, and I'm not religious whatsoever, and I thought jokingly, what if I encounter a Bigfoot or something like that? Then I would just be one of those crazy people nobody believes. I kept walking and noticed a very clear, large angry face in the base of a tree. I thought it looked cool, so I took a photo. I kept looking at the face, and everything changed. I suddenly froze, I had shivers down my whole body, and I was starting to feel very strange and uneasy. I looked further up the tree, and I saw eyes. Now, the reason I know that these eyes are different from just eye-like shapes in trees is because I constantly had the feeling of being watched and had an extremely unsettling feeling every time I looked directly at one of these eyes on this trail. I'm starting to get nervous, so I slowly start walking, and I see eyes everywhere. The expressions of the trees were suspicious at first, but as I started taking more photos, they got angrier and angrier, almost as if they knew that I knew what was going on. Looking directly at me, I took some more photos to ensure I wasn't hallucinating, and my fight or flight started kicking in. I walked cautiously but also as fast as I was able to, and whilst I was leaving, I would glance left and right and just see trees looking at me. As I made it out, I looked at every tree that had a facial sort of look to it and felt nothing. I knew immediately that something was happening on that trail, and I was not supposed to see it. The woman by the tracks. I never believed in ghosts. Honestly, I used to roll my eyes at the idea. But something happened to me on the night of February 17, 2017, just before 11 p.m., that I still can't explain, and it's stuck with me ever since. That night I had dropped someone off in the area, and I was driving back near the Liesbeek River, on a road that runs close to the train tracks between Mowbray and Rondebosch. It was quiet, with no one else around. Cape Town, South Africa. Then I saw her. At first I thought it was just a pedestrian, but as I got closer I realized something was very wrong. She was draped in what looked like a white cloth, almost like a duvet cover, with a clear outline of hair and a body, but no features at all. No face. No details. Just a full human shape in white. She didn't glow or flicker, she was solid. So close I could have reached out and touched her through my window. That's when the atmosphere changed. The inside of my car went ice cold. The air felt heavy, unnatural. I knew in my gut she wasn't peaceful. As I approached, she never moved aside. She didn't react the way a normal person would if a car came up next to them. But I knew she was aware of me. She even slowed her pace slightly as I drew level with her and turned partially toward me just enough to let me know she knew I was there. But she never looked at me fully, never altered her path. Then I realized with horror, I was actually driving down a cul-de-sac. My stomach dropped. I did a sharp U-turn to get out of there. But in the space of those few seconds, she was gone. Completely. No sign of her anywhere. Given how slowly she had been moving, there was absolutely no way she could have left the road that quickly. She had just vanished. I was so shaken that I didn't even want to go back to my empty flat. All my housemates were out. Instead, I drove around busy roads just to be near people, headlights, and movement. I ended up phoning a friend in Australia because I knew they'd be awake, I just needed to hear a familiar voice to calm down. I can't explain what I saw. I didn't believe in ghosts before that night. But after seeing her feeling that unnatural cold, being so close I could have touched her, and watching her disappear into thin air, I can't say that anymore. I am wondering if anyone has similar stories nearby, or a newspaper clipping or something to direct me on what it is. Can't believe it was 8 years ago. But I believe it is connected to something real. I have a few stories I don't usually have the occasion to share. I want to know if anyone has experienced something similar, though, so I'll start with this one. I had a childhood sweetheart, dated from 6th grade through freshman year of college, whose family was very involved in a particular religious group. It's kind of complex to explain, but they follow the teachings of a man from India who had such a devoted following here in the States that he had kind of a vacation home in Myrtle Beach, where he spent a lot of the later part of his life before he passed in the 60s. The home was kept in pristine condition after his death, with his followers dedicating a lot of time and resources to making it look like he had never left. The land around the home was turned into a spiritual retreat center for his followers. It's common for people in the religion to stay there and make time to visit his Myrtle Beach residence as a kind of pilgrimage of sorts. My ex and his family would drive down any time they had a long weekend. Naturally, after basically growing up together, I went with them on these family trips a few times, even though I didn't believe in their religion. They never expected me to or tried to convert me. It wasn't that kind of religious group. I viewed it almost like going to Catholic Mass with a friend after a sleepover. I didn't have to believe in what I was exposed to, I just had to be respectful and follow the same customs and courtesies as the other attendees. The first and only time I ever actually went into the religious leader's old house, I really wasn't expecting much from it. There were only 2 rules to visit the home. You have to remove your shoes and leave your phone, or any other potential noisemakers, on the front porch, and you must remain absolutely silent when you're inside. It was a pretty normal looking house, except for the fact that it looked exactly as it had during the 60s. All of the appliances, the furniture, and the decor, everything had remained completely unchanged, kind of like a full-scale time capsule. Here or there you'd see things that belonged to the religious leader, a pair of the man's house slippers left where he'd taken them off last, a newspaper from the last time he'd visited the States. I thought it was cool, kind of like walking through a museum, but didn't really think much else about it. After looking around the living room and dining area, we made it to the room that had once been the man's bedroom. There was a bit of a wait to actually walk inside of the room because a lot of his followers were there that day, so we waited our turn in the hall before being motioned inside. To this day I don't really have words to describe what it was that I felt in that room. Again, I want to make it super clear that I was not a follower of this religion. I was, and still am to this day, a regular church-going Methodist. That's what makes my experience there so confounding to me. You see, as soon as I walked into the room, I felt something. The best way I can describe it is like a presence that took up all of the air in the room. Even that doesn't really capture it, though. My chest felt tight, and I was overtaken by the feeling that someone was staring directly at me. I couldn't bring myself to lift my eyes to the bed because that's where it felt like the presence was centered. I don't think I could have spoken a word even if there wasn't a rule about maintaining silence. The energy in there was so heavy. As soon as we walked into the hall, I felt like I could breathe again. Once we were outside, my ex and his mom asked what I thought of the house. I tried, in vain, to describe what I'd felt, and they nodded in agreement, saying that they usually felt that kind of energy too. The only other places that have come close to me in terms of being heavy like that are some historical sites I've visited, like Gettysburg, Antietam, some spots in Savannah, and Arlington. Anyway, has anyone else ever felt like that or know kind of what I'm talking about with the whole places feeling heavy thing? In the basement of my great-great-grandmother's house, there is an old root cellar that has a horseshoe sitting on the center shelf. As a child, I was told that the horseshoe was placed there because my great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather bought the house at a low price after a double murder occurred in it. They realized the house was incredibly haunted, so they had a Baptist pastor come over to bless the house and place a horseshoe in the root cellar to keep the ghost at bay. It was some kind of old world folk magic thing. 10-year-old me thought it was bull crap, so I went down to the basement and took the horseshoe out of the root cellar. The house is 2 stories but is built like 2 separate 2-bedroom apartments. At the time no one was living upstairs, so it was empty except for some furniture they were storing up there. That same night that I took the horseshoe, my grandmother had me, my brother, and my big cousin over for a grandbaby sleepover. That night we kept hearing the sound of loud steps, like someone wearing dress shoes, and the sound of furniture being pushed on the floor above us. We checked upstairs all night but never found anyone. But we found scratch marks in the floor from the furniture being pushed. That was enough for me to be convinced, so the following morning I went back to the basement to put the horseshoe back. It was oddly cold in the basement, like really oddly cold, as it was the middle of summer and the basement was hot when I went down to take the horseshoe at the same time yesterday. I was super scared, but I knew I had to put it back, or this would not stop. I was by myself in that basement, but it felt like I was being watched by someone. Now here's the part of the story that people call BS on whenever I tell it, but I swear this happened to me. When I got to the doorway of the root cellar, I felt an insanely cold breeze coming out of it. But it was an old stone and mortar room 6 feet underground, so I have no idea how a breeze, let alone a cold one, got through. I was so ducking scared, but I was at the door, so all I had to do was place it on the center shelf and dip. I took 3 steps into the root cellar, and I swear to God what happened next really happened to me. Something pushed me, and I heard a gravely deep voice say no. I felt as if an adult-sized hand was pushing against my chest, shoving me back out of the root cellar, while I heard a man's voice growl the word no. I screamed bloody murder, threw the horseshoe onto the middle shelf, and ran for my life out of that basement. To this day no one in my family believes me and blames it on me being a scared little kid with a wild imagination at the time, but I know what I felt, heard, and saw. I had 3 legitimately scary paranormal experiences when I was completely alone, but I have no evidence to support them. 1. I woke up in the middle of the night and tried to sit up, but I was almost repelled back a few inches, as if by a magnet. I kept trying to find a way to move, but the area where I was pushed back became lower, and my attempts to roll to the sides were soon blocked. So, I threw up my hands and they got stuck in mid-air, to where I could neither push them further nor pull them back. So, I calmed down so I could try to think of a plan. All of a sudden, it all went away instantly and never came back. Never happened again, either. 2. Was staying at a now ex-girlfriend's house and was there alone with her mom's dog. I was trying to fall asleep in her room. All of a sudden, there was a massive crash, like the back door got kicked open. The dog was outside and began barking loudly. I heard heavy footsteps wander around the kitchen and the sound of drawers and cupboards being thrown open and rummaged around in until it stopped. Then, I heard the footsteps come up the hall, go into her mom's room and stop. I immediately registered that as weird because her mom was so paranoid. She'd put a deadbolt lock on an outside door in her bedroom, and it was always locked when she wasn't there. But whatever it was, she just opened it like it was unlocked, went inside, and closed the door behind them. No further noise whatsoever. The second that door closed, it was dead silent. No sound of the person walking around, or talking, or sitting on the bed or floor. I eventually fell asleep in that silence and hoped it was nothing. Around dawn, the door reopened, and footsteps went back up the hall and out the back door. I went out, the bedroom door was still locked, the kitchen was completely clean, and the back door was undamaged and still shut. 3. While I was walking in the woods by a river that flowed through my backyard, I looked across and saw a crow gliding down from the air. It then ran face first into a tree and fell into the bushes and tall grass below. The only explanation I could imagine was that it might have had a heart attack while in the air. After that, the bushes began rustling and moving as if something large was pushing them aside to walk through, and someone started giggling and calling my name. That was problematic. When we lived next to a nature reserve, I didn't know any of my neighbors. The house on that side was abandoned, and I later discovered that we had owned the land on that side of the river all along without realizing it. Ultimately, I was uncertain how to interpret what was happening, so I simply walked away and disregarded it. I later had a second similar incident by the same woods with a second witness, though. I don't necessarily think people don't believe this story, but it's rather scary. Anyways, I remember a time when I was in elementary school. I remember sitting downstairs alone at 7 p.m. in the first floor living room studying for some 4th or 5th grade science test I had the next day. The living room door was open. And while I was studying, sitting on the couch, I heard a gentle woman's voice call my name. I looked up, scanned the room, and no one was there. Yet I knew the voice came from where the living room door was situated, yet when I looked there, I saw no one there. I quickly dismissed it as my own imagination and didn't give it much thought and continued to study. Just a few minutes later, I hear the voice echo my name again. Yet this time, the voice was notably closer, now inside the living room. This time I kind of freaked out, yet I looked around and saw no one there, and again just dismissed it as my mind playing some tricks on me. So after calming down, I continued to study, and just 2 to 3 minutes later, I heard my name being mentioned again, yet this time, I heard it directly whispered in my right ear, as if a person's mouth was right next to my ear. I even felt this air travel through my ear canal and felt very ticklish. In that moment, I flung the science textbook in the air, then quickly ran upstairs. Luckily, I still managed to do well on that science test. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night. Uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute, and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone, and sure enough, 5-something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors Lights I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Please help. I just turned 19 last week, and I finally got my place. It's a small 1-bedroom apartment estate away from my parents. It's not much, but it's mine, and I was honestly excited to finally be on my own. The first couple days were normal. I spent most of the time unpacking, ordering food, and sleeping on the floor while I waited for my mattress. I was nervous being alone, but I figured I'd get used to it. The first weird thing happened on my second night. I woke up at 3 a.m. to knocking. Not from outside my door but from inside the wall next to my bed, 3 slow knocks and then silence. At first I laughed to myself. Pipes, I thought. Old buildings make noises. The next night, though, I heard something different. I was lying on my new mattress scrolling on my phone when I thought I heard someone whisper. My music was low, so I paused it and listened. It was a man's voice, low and rough, like it was coming from the corner of the room. I turned my phone light on. Nothing there, I told myself. It was just the neighbor's thin walls. But when I shut everything off to sleep, I swear I heard it again. Closer after that I started to notice little things. My bathroom faucet turned on for just a second and then shut off on its own. One morning I woke up, and my keys were on the kitchen counter even though I was sure I left them by the front door. At first I thought maybe I was just stressed out from moving. Maybe I was forgetting where I put things. But then last night happened. I woke up at exactly 2:47 a.m. My phone was on the nightstand glowing, and that's how I saw the time. My bedroom door was open. I never leave it open because I don't like looking into the hallway while I sleep. The kitchen light was on like always. But in the doorway I saw someone standing there, a tall shadow. I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I told myself it was just the light messing with me, but it didn't go away. It stayed there, watching me. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The door was still open, but no one was there. I thought maybe I dreamed it, but today things kept happening. My cabinets kept opening a little bit every time I left the room. Like, not wide open, just cracked an inch, like someone touched them. My phone slid off the counter while I was in the shower. I came out, and it was face down on the kitchen floor. I know I didn't leave it there. Now it's night again. I'm sitting here typing this, and I keep hearing faint knocks. 3 knocks every time, first from the wall, then the floor. Just now it came from behind me. I don't even want to turn around. I don't want to see anything there. I'm not a believer in ghosts, I never have been. But I can't explain this. I haven't slept properly in days. My eyes hurt. My head hurts. I feel like I'm losing it. I don't know if I should leave or if I'm overreacting. If anyone is listening, what am I supposed to do? It's been 3 days, and I still don't know what's going on. I tried to just ignore it and act normal, but it keeps happening every single night. The knocking hasn't stopped, it's always 3 knocks, sometimes from the wall, sometimes from the ceiling. Last night, it was from underneath the bed. I almost left right then, but I was too scared to even move. I've been leaving the TV on to try and drown it out, but that doesn't help. I keep hearing whispering. Behind the noise, it's not just one voice anymore, it sounds like more than one, and I can't make out what they're saying. I tried recording it on my phone, but when I play it back, there's nothing, just static. The worst part is now things are moving in front of me. I was sitting at the kitchen table yesterday, and the chair across from me pulled back just a little, like someone was sitting down. I swear to God, I saw it happen. I just stared at it for a long time. I didn't even want to breathe. I haven't slept more than maybe an hour at a time. I feel sick, my head feels heavy like something is pressing on me all the time. The apartment feels wrong now, even during the day. It's cold in here no matter what I do. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. I thought maybe I was just stressed, but it's getting worse, and I know what I saw last night. I woke up, and the tall shadow was in the corner of my room, not in the doorway this time but inside the room, closer. It didn't move, it just stayed there until I shut my eyes and pretended to be asleep. When I opened them again, it was gone. I don't know if I should leave or try to get help. I feel like if I leave, it might follow me. I don't know what to do. When I was 10, I was chilling outside at around 10 am on my birthday and was alone, so I was tired and on the edge of falling asleep, and I saw a pure white stag in the distance looking at me. It had pure black eyes, and it was heavily scarred, with its horn looking worn and broken. I don't know why, but I got scared, and I couldn't move. It was around 20 feet away from me before I got up from my chair and ran to the backyard door and went inside. All I could hear was slamming on the iron door since I was locked in the garage, tears streaming down my face. It felt like hours staying in the corner with a rusty machete. I was ready to die that day, and then, after what felt like an eternity, it fell silent, and that was when I experienced true fear. I thought to myself, is it gone? Is it going to charge? After that, I heard a clatter of hooves approaching, followed by the door slamming open as my mother entered and asked where I had been. I explained everything, but when we saw the cams, it was nothing. It was as if I was running from nothing. Even the door had no dent, which I looked at in disbelief. Sometimes when I'm alone there are many things I think about, but one of the only things that is always on my mind is its eyes, pure black. I have since moved, but that experience was terrifying. If anyone can explain if this is a mental phenomenon, can you explain it, please? I had an encounter with 4 gray aliens about 20 years ago. About 3 days after it happened, I was so bothered by everyone's overall reaction being mostly non-existent after sharing my experience with them, I stopped talking about it. At most, I would occasionally mention it after that, but never tell the story. I would even say it jokingly, I guess for my own amusement. It wasn't until about 6 years ago that I started talking about it and sharing the story with certain people. I've probably gone over the memory of it hundreds of times over the years, as if I'm telling people about it, always careful to not speculate on details or add details when not meaning to, eventually making a false memory, etc. Many times, I would even recount the story to an empty room, pretending that people were listening. Although it was scary, I never felt in danger. I mean, people call them aliens, I call them aliens, and they look like what they do in movies, people's drawings, etc., but they aren't what we think of as far as what they are. They aren't from outer space, they didn't fly light years on a ship to get here, etc. Sorry to disappoint, if that's what you like to believe. And no, I'm not saying they don't cruise around this planet in strange flying crafts, they certainly do, but they aren't from outer space or some distant galaxy. That's actually kind of ridiculous. Anyway, regarding my scary experience, I would like to express that after 20 years, I've realized that just because people may not have believed me doesn't mean they didn't care. It's simply a situation where many don't know how to respond. However, it would be nice if the courtesy response could be improved to acknowledge the experience I shared. After all, I literally confirmed that aliens exist. At the very least, some enthusiasm or surprise would be appreciated. My friend and I were driving around our small town one night around 1 a.m. We were just casually talking and listening to the radio low. Well, we both saw someone basically walk into the road right in front of her car. She slammed on the brakes, but the person was just gone, literally like into thin air. We drove around the block and surrounding area like 5 times after to see if we could spot that person again, but there was no one. None of our friends believed us, but we both know what we saw. The 3-fingered entity scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. There is one strange thing that happened during my childhood that I know was not a dream, nightmare, or sleep paralysis episode. We lived in a tiny row home, and I shared the attic with my brother Dave, who is a year younger than me. The room was split with an open staircase, and Dave slept on one side of the room and I on the other. There was a wall light at the top of the stairs that we usually kept on at night, and it happened to be turned on the night when something unearthly dropped in for a visit. I was about 8 or 9 at the time when I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud, almost deafening electronic humming sound. Not unusual was that my thin blue blanket was covering my head, which is something I regularly did when I went to bed. Highly unusual, in addition to the humming sound, was that I could clearly see the shadow of a 3-fingered claw-like hand moving up and down above my head. I was terrified. To my young mind, it was the devil. I could conjure up no other explanation. Who's there? I managed a couple of times, but the non-human hand just continued to get closer to my head and then farther away. It was like it was performing some odd religious rite. I could not gather up the courage to remove the blanket that was over my head to face whatever was attached to that claw, but I did peek out of it slightly in my brother's direction. Dave appeared sound asleep. I started to yell his name. Dave did not budge, but that could have been due to the electronic humming sound, which I immediately realized was muffling my voice. My terror grew greater, and I started to scream for my parents. Nobody came. I turned my focus back to the claw-like hand and tried to communicate with it again, but it just continued to move up and down, with thick outstretched fingers that came to points at the tips, above my head. I closed my eyes and started to pray. Every now and then I would open my eyes to see whether the hand was still there. It was still there, and I should have known it was still there because the humming sound was constant. I prayed and prayed and prayed. The next thing I knew, it was bright outside and it was morning. But it wasn't like I had a nightmare and woke up. It was like time had passed between the moment I was praying and the time I woke up. It wasn't like waking from a nightmare at the breaking of day. Something had happened late the night before, I passed out somehow, hours went by, and then I awoke. The entire event lasted about 20 minutes, and I was wide awake the whole time. There was no doubt, it was not a dream. When I told my mother about it in the morning, she did not believe it was real. I argued with her for about 30 minutes, but she insisted that I only had a dream. It crossed my mind at the time that I'm only a kid, and nobody is going to believe me. As the years went by, I sometimes told the story to friends and family members, and many times the response was the same as my mother's: it must have been a dream. For well over 10 years after the event, the only explanation I could muster was that the thing in my room was something satanic. I've always known that something was in my room that night and that it could not have been a dream. It was not until the late 1980s or early 1990s that my opinion about the event started to change. In the late 1970s or early 1980s, I first learned that some people believed extraterrestrial beings were coming to Earth. I had watched science fiction films growing up, such as Earth vs. the Flying Saucers and War of the Worlds, and I even went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind in a movie theater sometime in 1978. But I never seriously entertained the possibility that beings from other worlds were actually coming here during the first 10 or 11 years of my life. In either 1979 or 1980, my father was watching an episode of the TV series In Search of, a documentary that was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. The episode speculated on the possibility that beings from other worlds were coming to Earth in flying saucers. It was the first time I had ever been presented with information that extraterrestrials could actually be real. I was fascinated, but I didn't really know what I thought about it until years later. After watching shows on television in the late 1980s or early 1990s about people who claimed to be abducted by aliens, a bell started to sound off in my head. The night of the claw finally started to make sense, right down to the electronic humming sound. It wasn't Lucifer who appeared in my bedroom that night, it was an alien. Even though I embraced this new concept, I still had some doubt about an extraterrestrial reality. It was simply too fantastic. Additionally, I would never be able to conclusively prove to anyone that an alien had infiltrated my childhood sleeping quarters in the 1970s to induce a strange shock in me, as I was the only one awake to witness the event. I knew something very odd had happened. I knew for a fact there was something in my room that night no matter what anybody else said, and I knew that there was no way, no how, that the event was a dream. I still know it, and I'll always know it. I also believe there's a strong possibility that something more happened that night but that I have no conscious memory of it. I know for sure that when I was praying to God to save me that night, I was far from sleepy. I was frightened beyond belief and not at all feeling like a little shut-eye. Didn't see a thing. But let me paint a picture. Every house we ever lived in growing up, which were a lot of houses, by the time I moved away from home at 16, we had lived in 12 houses. I digress. Every house our dad would tell my twin and me, as the oldest to scare us, that the previous owner had died in the home. Well, circa 1998, we moved into a rancher. There were 5 kids, my twin and I included, aged 12. A younger brother aged 7 and 2 sisters aged 6 and 5. The core family, not my twin and me, had wonderful, fully finished, beautiful 1950s bedrooms upstairs in the main living area. This house had a full, unfinished basement. It had been framed in for 2 bedrooms, one at each side of the stairs. A front room with a fireplace and then a large laundry room. The windows were not egress. They were rectangular, maybe 18 inches by 10 inches, with a handle that, when turned a quarter turn, released the handle from a little notch in the cement, and the windows opened at a 30-degree angle. There were 4. One in said living room area. One in the laundry zone, one to the left of the stairs, and one to the right, which is where our makeshift room was. Reminder. Unfinished. Cement floors and cement exterior walls with no walls to isolate spaces. This is where my twin and I were put. Shortly after moving in, odd things happened. It was umpteen years ago, so I can't recall all of them. 3 major things that ruffled my 12-year-old nerves of steel were hearing footsteps plop down the wooden unfinished staircase. It wasn't closed in, and so without walls there was no mistaking someone coming down or up those stairs. Another time my family was loading wood from the truck to our little shanty garage. I was alone in the house avoiding work, lol. I sat in the upstairs living room watching the TV, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted and felt off, and every door in the house slammed shut and vibrated violently. I understood how doors could close because of pressure with a window open and another door closing or wind, etc. This was the middle of winter. No windows or doors were open, especially with our dad. I stood up, knowing something beyond explanation had happened. I never told my parents or siblings, but I did go help with that wood after that. And lastly, the final thing I do recall before the main event is sleeping down in our little makeshift room and a voice telling me a man was at our house, and I was told to wake up and go see him. I heard dogs on the upstairs floor scraping around. I went upstairs, but no one was there. In fact, it was late, and the whole upstairs was quiet, and I gradually remembered as I woke up more that we didn't have a damn dog at the time. My twin and I started babysitting for a young couple who had a few boys that needed to be watched sporadically. We were over at their house, and the talking about our house and the basement came up because the dad worked as a general contractor. One of us had mentioned how strange it is that it's framed in but not finished, and he says, "Well, you know the history of the house, right?" Turns out the basement at one point was finished. But a gentleman lived there alone after his wife passed. He was in his 70s, maybe early 80s. He either experienced a medical emergency that caused him to fall down the basement stairs, or he simply fell while getting his laundry. He lay dead at the bottom for months in the heat of the summer. His poor little doggies had eaten at him as well but eventually succumbed to malnourishment as well. He had maybe 2 dogs. Because of smells and decay, the entire basement was gutted. Once in a very small town in Washington state, I had an experience people may refer to as sleep paralysis. I was staying at a cousin's house with my mom. We slept in the cousin's guest room that had a bed and a love seat. I was 15 and was on the brink of falling asleep. I was just enjoying the quiet of the house and the cool air coming through the open window. She lived out in the woods/rural area, and all the windows were open. There wasn't traffic, and her neighbors were scattered by half a mile or so. A voice or sensation came over me. I was trapped in my body but seeing things from a different person's perspective. There were spirits of First Nations people. A group, maybe 6 people. They were outside of her home. I could see the house in the night and the windows slightly opened. I was just like if I were outside. The feeling that was conveyed was pure hatred. Hatred for Caucasian people for the atrocities committed against these poor people. Claiming land as our own that had been occupied for thousands of years by them, forcing them to assimilate to what we found proper. Holding them to our laws when their way of life and core beliefs were not aligned with Christianity, which colonizers used to dictate laws and, quite frankly, was an excuse to treat these people poorly based on their bias and racial ignorance. If interested, read the account of the Whitman massacre that took place in Washington state. Anyhow, I digress. I could understand why these spiritual natives were so resentful and hateful. I could see shadows across the windows. It felt like sleep paralysis because I could not move or speak, but I was fully awake. The feeling was the most intense fear and dread. Eventually a big old breeze came through the window, fluttering papers from the side table, and I was able to move. I know it doesn't sound scary in today's modern cinematic productions, but at 15 back in 2001, it was absolutely terrifying. It didn't have a mouth? This happened in September of 2020 in Aiken, South Carolina. I didn't grow up there, and we only lived there for about 6 months, so I am not too familiar with the area. Some of these details are pretty boring, but I think it helps explain the setting and situation better, so I'm going to give them regardless. My fiancé, G, had reconnected with an old friend from high school, B, and we decided to rent his basement, which was renovated into a separate apartment, while we looked for a place of our own. The house is not in a neighborhood, it's pretty rural in that area, in my opinion. We had neighbors, but each house had several acres of land separating them. B had 2 large adult dogs, around 55 to 65 pounds, and our dog was a little smaller than them at the time. The dogs would run around and play in the woods at the edge of the backyard. Everything was good for the first few weeks. Then at night we started feeling very unnerved if we had to go outside. I know it sounds so cliché, but it felt like something was standing in the woods staring at us. If we went somewhere after dark, we would do a speed walk, almost running from where we parked out front all the way around the side of the house to the backyard, which is where our entrance was. Then we started hearing it. As I mentioned earlier, the dogs ran and played in the woods, so we were very aware of what it sounded like when a 60-pound creature was rambling around in the woods. This was much bigger, so much bigger. It wasn't just the three of us hyping each other up to be scared, either. Anyone that came to hang out, there was a pool in the backyard, so we had a fair number of visitors, would hear it, and no one ever stayed outside after the sun set. We thought it was a bear, TBH, because whatever was making the noise was huge, much larger than a person, so a bear is the only thing that really fit in our minds. A few months go by, and we find our place, and we were in the process of moving out when this occurred. My fiancé was up at the car, arranging the boxes so that we could maximize the space we had available. I had just carried a box up to him and was walking back around the side of the house. From the front to the back, the yard was sloped downhill a little bit. As I was walking down to go around from the side to the back of the house, I saw it. Staring dead at me, straight into my eyes. I'm pretty sure my heart stopped beating for a few seconds, and I completely froze up. Some instinct inside of me made me begin walking again. I felt like I shouldn't run but try to act normal and get my ass inside. As soon as I got inside, I shut and locked the door but immediately had to unlock it and open it back up because I couldn't lock my fiancé outside with this thing. I immediately started seeing these weird scary pictures in my head. Pictures of me and my fiancé, ended, lying on the floor of our apartment with everything that was left in the apartment smashed on the floor around us. Then right after that something like, "No, that's not what it will do, my fear of the unknown is making me unreasonable. If I just let it in, it won't be like that." I kept having the weirdest urge to basically invite it in, which is absurd because the door was cracked open, and honestly, even if it had been shut and deadbolted, if that thing wanted in, I am pretty sure it would have gotten in. I was torn. I wanted to call out to my fiancé, but I didn't want to startle the thing by yelling, and I didn't want my fiancé to come rushing down to the door and have that thing spring on him and attack him. Finally I couldn't take it and yanked the door open. I was planning on running to the car, but my fiancé was right there. He had also seen the creature and had been observing it as it watched us. The second it turned and disappeared into the woods, he rushed down to the door. This thing was super tall, super skinny, and a sickly shade of whitish gray. It had brightly lit up, glowing eyes. One very crazy detail is that I swear the eyes were a golden color, and my fiancé swears they were red. I don't understand any of this, but especially that part. The worst part of its appearance, however, was that it didn't have a mouth. Besides its bright eyes, the rest of its face was just skin. Tightly stretched but perfectly smoothed out skin on its face. WTF? I have never in my life felt such a shock, like just a feeling in my heart that something was so wrong, as I did when I saw that thing looking into my eyes with its smoothed out skin where it should have a mouth. How do you eat if you have no mouth? How do you stay alive if you can't eat? Sometimes I worry that I honestly had the chance to meet and interact with a completely different species, and I blew it by being judgmental and fearful. This thing wasn't like me, so I was deathly afraid of it. Did I have a reason to be afraid? If it had wanted to hurt us, I'm 100% positive it could have. My fiancé said he could feel the evil radiating off of it. That I need to quit beating myself up because it did not have friendly intentions. I know that this sounds so totally and utterly fake that it is absurd. I wouldn't believe this if someone else shared it. I'm just wondering if anyone else has ever seen anything like this, and if they have, maybe they can tell me what the duck this thing is. For months after it happened I wouldn't talk about it. Anytime my fiancé brought it up, I would shut the conversation down. I didn't want to even think about it because I was scared it would feel me thinking of it somehow and come back and find me again. We don't live near there anymore, and now I know that's an irrational fear anyways. I've never told anyone about it, and neither has my fiancé. I couldn't bear to spill my guts to someone I'm close to about this situation that was so intensely terrifying and borderline traumatic. I know that sounds so drama queen-ish, but it's legit the most fearful experience of my life, and have them look in my eyes and not believe me. It would destroy my relationship with the person, and I don't want that to happen. I don't have many people that I am close to, and I would prefer to keep them. Thanks for listening, and if you have any ideas of what this thing is, please let me know. I saw a UFO when I was 8 or 9 years old back in the early 2000s, around 2002 to 2003. I was outside playing with our hound dog after dark, and I don't remember the season, but it was a warm, humid night. Currently, where I reside, we occasionally experience warm weather even during the depths of winter, so I am uncertain as to which season it was. Now my parents were never worried about me playing outside after dark growing up, as we lived on several acres of land in what was a safe area at the time. My parents also knew I always had the dog with me, which would alert me to any danger. There was also a huge field behind the house, and the field had one of those tall electrical towers in it. As I was playing, I remember the dog and I both looking up at the same time, but I don't remember why. Right next to the electrical tower there was a UFO hovering silently. The UFO had several white lights on the front of it. The width was about 2 truck lengths long, so about 30 feet in width. The dog and I just stood there for several seconds just watching it hover. I never felt scared, and the dog didn't even bark, and this dog barks at everything. We both just watched the UFO hovering for those several seconds before it suddenly turned and silently took off. It was so fast. If I had blinked when it took off, I would have never seen it leave. I would have just thought it just disappeared. It never made a sound, and there was no gust of wind like you would expect from something flying. Now here's the best part, I never thought anyone would believe me until I was in high school. When I told my parents as a kid, they told me it wasn't aliens. It was a plane from a military base nearby. So I went years just thinking it must have been a military plane. But many years later I found out my parents did believe me. As my dad finally told me the truth after we had a much scarier experience out one night fishing. My parents didn't want it getting out that their kid saw a UFO. And the reason why is because we lived so very close to where the Pascagoula aliens were spotted back in the 1970s. They also preferred I refrain from discussing it, as a family friend had a comparable experience during childhood in the 1980s when he was camping overnight with friends. That family friend and his friends talked about their experience at school but got majorly bullied at school about it and so went on to have a hard life because of it. Now I didn't meet this family friend until I was in high school, as he had moved far away. But when he came to visit, crazy experiences when camping got brought up, and he told me the story about his UFO experience. It was almost an exact match in every detail. Same size, same shape, and didn't make a sound. I told him about my experience, and he got as white as a sheet when I told him about how it turned and how quick it was with no gust of wind. Looking back, it's funny that when you talk to the right people, you will learn that sometimes those crazy experiences have happened to others, and then you don't feel so crazy after all. I one time heard an evil laugh, and yes, it sounds ducking stupid, but I can't explain it otherwise. I tried sharing this online, and people came up with all kinds of alternatives, in a good sense, but I tried listening to those sounds on YouTube, and nothing matched. I was out one evening, in our front yard, and around here at night, unless there is a party in town or a circus, or whatever, there is dead silence. It was in the summer, so even the nights were hot indoors. I got out and stood there for half a minute, then suddenly, without warning, I heard an evil and demonic laugh for about 5 to 6 seconds, then everything went silent again, and I haven't heard it since. I don't know what it was. It doesn't scare me outright to this day, but it unsettles me. There were no parties in the neighborhood, no people or cars on the street, nothing. It happened about 2 streets from me. I think there are about 4 to 5 houses between me and the place where the evil laughter was heard. I do not smoke weed or take drugs, and I rarely drink, so I was clean/sober. I don't know how else to explain it. I have gone by the area where it happened many times, and nothing seems out of the ordinary when going over there. Ghost, on the first floor. Background. While still a young teenager, my family and I moved into an old farm, nothing creepy or standing out, literally just an old farm. The main farmhouse was bigger than most average houses here but not overly grand and was divided into a ground floor and a first floor. With access to storage under the roof. It was located about a 1-hour drive from any major city and about 20 minutes from the local village. When we first moved in, the plan was that my little brother, 5 years younger, and I would have to share the first floor by ourselves. The first floor consisted of all we could need, a living room/playroom, 3 bedrooms, a toilet/bath, and a semi-long hallway. The ground floor had the kitchen area, a great living room, a dining room, an office area, and a master bedroom connected to a toilet/bath. For context, my father was a remarkable man and a straightforward, pragmatic individual who believed in seeing things firsthand to believe them. Even though my family has never denied spirits, fey creatures, or gods, we like to turn to our logic before turning anywhere near the unexplainable, because most things can be explained by wind, temperature, weather, etc., but we have had moments where we lacked explanations, and this is one of those moments. And please, if anyone has any idea how the sound of footsteps can appear as loud as your own, please explain, because I truly would like another explanation other than it was a ghost story. As I mentioned, It was a good place for a family of 4 to spread out, but from the very first day, no one, not even my father, wanted to go upstairs. When you stood at the stairs and looked up, you just felt what? Unwelcome, like you were in the wrong part of town. At first we tried going up there, my brother and I, but we couldn't be there for more than a few minutes without bolting downstairs again, like someone was after us. So despite the whole first floor being empty, we rather wanted to stay in the office and sleep on our makeshift beds. My parents didn't even want to use the first floor for boxes, they were all just piled up against the wall in the office and living room. Life goes on despite a creepy part of the house, and a week later we were all gathered in the living room for some TV time. We always did this once a week at least, and it was a nice relaxing time. Until suddenly we heard footsteps above us, from the hallway, and we all just sat still listening, kind of disbelieving it and wondering if someone had gotten in through a window. My father made a shh gesture to silence us, then got up from his chair and grabbed his sword, intending to scare whoever was upstairs. He then continued over to the stairs, made a last look at us, as in I got this, and walked up the stairs. We could hear how his footsteps and whoever was in the hallway were going to meet where the stairs and hallway met. Then, as you would expect, a loud war cry from my father, shaking the house, and then silence. Nothing. My father returned confused, disbelieving the whole scenario, and then with the confused words, "There was nobody there." He set the sword in its place and returned to his chair, staring blankly at the TV. With renewed courage, my brother and I tried it the day after going back up there, and for the first time we had lived there, we got all the way to the living room at the end of the hallway. It seemed stupid, but for us at the time, it was a true achievement of courage. I remember the room was filled with dead flies everywhere and an enclosed smell. We were there for about 30 seconds when suddenly, something that felt like a train hit us in the chest, causing us to run back downstairs screaming in pure horror to our parents, who were rushing towards us, believing someone had broken in. They had heard the bam too. It sounded like a door getting slammed/kicked, though there was no door being closed/kicked at the time. My father this time walked upstairs and shouted something like, "Anyone here living or dead? This is my house now. You are living under my roof and must follow my rules. Accept it or duck off." And funny enough, for some weeks we felt and heard nothing. Suddenly we were welcome upstairs. My brother and I began to spend some time upstairs while still sleeping in the office, but we were just relieved to be safe from being hunted back downstairs when we were up there. We even cleaned the playroom and moved some Legos and stuff up there. I don't remember why, but one day I had to be home alone. I had done it many times, just not in that place, and it had never been a problem. That day it was only for a few hours, so I sat down in the living room, watching TV to kill time. And then, footsteps from upstairs, walking towards the stairs. I silently grabbed my phone, ran into my parents' bedroom, and, in true child style, hid under their bed. It seemed like the best hiding spot at the time, since I would have had to pass the stairs to get outside. I lay there as silent as I could and called my parents, all while I could hear the steps walking around the house, now inside the living room and office, which were both connected to the bedroom by separate doors. My parents were almost home and told me to stay on the phone and only say something if someone found me. I guess they didn't want me to give up my location if someone had actually broken in. It felt like hours, but it must have realistically only been like 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then bam, the front door gets kicked in, and my father runs straight for me, shouting to whoever, "If I find you, I'm going to rip your spine from your arse." As soon as I heard my father, I just remember shouting, "He is in the office." I didn't want my father to get hurt or surprised. But again, nobody was there. This time my father had had enough, and we moved to a new house the same week. There was more than just the footsteps going on, closets opening and closing, things falling from shelves, but only the footsteps are what I haven't been able to explain, as I have with the old closets or bad shelves. We never really talked about it after we left, though we learned that the farmhouse had burned down a month after we moved from there. Occasionally I still think about it and wonder if my father ever saw or felt something up there. Okay, so this story was 10 years ago. During 2015, my mom and I wanted so much to have a language school. Why? Why not? We wanted to share with everyone a new way to communicate. My native language is Spanish, but my English level is C1, and having this is a huge wall breaker for me to grow not only nationally but internationally as well, so we wanted to share this with everyone. We used to live in CDVS, San Luis Potosi, a small city-town place where we lived almost all my childhood. I must explain that this valley is known to be a huge esoteric place filled with tons of legends, witches, shamans, and more. We rented a huge house a few streets from the city hall. Now, the house map is very important to tell you that we lived in a room at the front of the house. During the tour, the lady who owns the place showed us around, and we found it perfect for our school, a large space with plenty of areas for courses, a library, a classroom, and a huge open area. The place was very cold, but we considered saving money on energy by not buying an AC. One room was closed, the storage room at the very end of the place. We asked why, and she just said that she had lost the key. During that same week, we started to move into the place. The cable guy we got seemed to have known my mother for a very long time. While they talked, I started to play with his niece. We played hide and seek. We all were at the garage, I started counting there, and I went to seek the girl. The library, bathroom, kitchen, and storage were closed, so the only spaces where she could have hidden were the classroom, room, and esplanade. When I went to the room, I saw a child running from the classroom to the open space. I ran through the office, and when I turned the corner to the open space, no one was there. Funny, but I saw a child running to that spot. Immediately I heard a laugh. The cable guy's niece was outside. How? All doors are closed, and there's no door from the kitchen to the esplanade. I went outside and told this to everyone outside, my mom, the cable guy, the girl, and the girl's mom. No one believed me. Then a lady entered the place and said she was looking for info about the school. We started chatting when this lady froze. Can you show me around? We gave her a tour, and she said, I don't know if you believe in ghosts, but a moment back I saw a very angry woman staring back at us. We asked where, and she pointed to the classroom window. I must say, I always had this ability to feel presences or communicate with them, but this time I couldn't feel anything. A week went by. During the night, my mom wanted to go to the bathroom. I accompanied her, and I stood in the doorframe of the classroom next to the hall. I heard a knocking on the door. I opened it, and no one was there, but then, I felt a presence. My mom screamed, took me by the arm, and almost dragged me on the floor all the way to the room, and closed the door. She then said that she saw a dark shadow in the window of the esplanade. While I was trying to calm her, we heard someone running in the hall. Believe me when I say that we were freaking out. We sat and waited for any other noise. We heard thumps in the roof, and then someone knocked under the bed. We ran out of the building and saw the lights start flickering, and suddenly, a woman appeared at the front door. We closed the project. While talking to the owner, she explained that that house used to be some political offices for his brother, who was a candidate at the time. Sadly, he had passed away due to a car accident, which the rumor is was a witchcraft thing created by his own sister. This caused his wife to end herself and her daughter in the storage room. That's why it was closed all along. They didn't want to break a seal, but this was broken because we did open it when the locksmith came to open the door, and the smell was awful. Whenever I tell this story, no one believes me. Okay, so this happened around 2005 or 2006, when I was about 6 or 7 years old. Pennsylvania, USA. So, my mom used to garden a lot. We have 2 backyards, an upper one where we had a big deck off the back of the house taking up a lot of the space, and a lower one, where the garden was. One time, my brother and I were both looking for our mom around the house. We went to the bottom of the stairwell that led to the bedrooms on the 2nd floor because we figured she might have been up there folding clothes or something. There are only 2 rooms up there on either side of the top of the staircase, which were my room and my brother's room, with a tiny broom closet directly at the top landing of the stairs. There are no doors to the outside on that floor, and our house is further away from the neighboring houses, so there is no way we could have overheard someone talking from a neighbor's house through a window. Anyways, we called up the stairs to my mom, and a young female voice, clearly too young to be our mom's voice, replied. She sounded like one of those women from old films, with a very soft and formal tone. It was coming from my bedroom upstairs. It went like this: me, Mom, are you up there? Voice, yes, I am. Come on up. Me, where are you? Voice, in the bedroom. Me, what are you doing? Voice, come on up. Then there were no more replies or any other noise from the room. My brother and I were standing there in total shock because there was no one else in our house. We were really freaked out, so we went into the living room to ask my dad if he heard it. He was busy doing paperwork and said he hadn't heard a thing and thought we were making it up. He made a joke that it might have been our female cat, Itchy. So we were really scared at that point, and there was no way we were going to go upstairs to investigate. We then went outside into the lower backyard, where we found our mom cleaning up the garden. She said she hadn't been upstairs, and she seemed really confused when we mentioned it. No other women lived with us, and even to this day my brother and I both clearly remember the incident. The voice didn't belong to anyone we knew. And even if there was someone up there, there's no way she could have gotten out without us seeing her leave because she either 1. Would have had to go down the stairs, through the living room past our dad, and out the front door. 2. Went out the back door, which we would have seen from the lower backyard. 3. The way our house is set up, the second floor is right over a hill, and if someone jumped out a window, they would break their legs lamau. We were all home that day, so we would have seen her enter. So no, my dad was not cheating or something. It was so weird, and my brother and I still talk about it to this day. Our mom doesn't even remember any time we mention it to her. And our dad passed away in 2010. It's following me. This experience started when I moved from the south of England to the north. In 2010-11 the UK experienced a double-dip recession, dramatic decline in economic activity. Being in my mid-teens and having to move so far away from my family and friends to a new area and a new school, you can imagine I was not in the best mental state. So the first few months went by with nothing much happening besides a couple of bumps and an odd smell that I couldn't explain. I should say that I lived with my parents and 2 younger brothers, so I just assumed the noises and smells were from boisterous smelly boys. So it's September 2010, and I have just started college. In the UK, you start college at ages 16, 17, or 18. By this point I have started getting into watching people ghost hunt on YouTube, and one used a ghost app on their phone, so I download it and start seeing if there is anything in my room, thinking it was just some rubbish that didn't work. The radar in the middle of the screen says that there is something standing behind me, and I uninstalled it immediately. A couple of days go by, and I haven't thought much about what happened on the app. I'm doing my college work at my desk in my bedroom, and suddenly my nostrils are filled with an overwhelming smell of cigarette smoke. I quickly looked around, and the smell was stronger directly behind me, where the app said someone had stood a few days earlier, and at the time I didn't know that smoking smells are apparently associated with malevolent spirits. Anyway, no one smokes in our family apart from my grandpa. Grandpa is dead. He had been for almost 10 years prior to this event, and ironically, he died from cancer caused by his unhealthy smoking habit. The doctors had told him not to quit, as the shock to his system would actually end him faster, so he smoked like a chimney till the very day he died. My point being that it wasn't a massive jump for me to smell this smoke and immediately associate it with my deceased grandpa. I said aloud, "Hi, Grandpa, it's really nice that you've come to see me, but I'm fine, and I would really appreciate it if you would leave because I hate that smell." As soon as I said that, the smell disappeared as quickly as it appeared. A few short weeks later it happened again, but it hasn't happened since. I told my mom about it, and she said that she smelled it too, and we both believe it was her deceased father. Not long after that, I started hearing scratching in the walls as if an animal were stuck inside, and when I first heard it, that is exactly what I thought. I heard it again whilst in the living room and again in my bedroom, but this time my mom was with me, and she heard it too. Thinking it was all something explainable, except for the smells, as I believed Grandpa was there to see his daughter, I moved out and started renting a room in a house some friends owned. The scratches I heard in my parents' house a few times, I heard again in the living room of my friends. Everyone was there and heard it. The scariest part is that those scratches only started after I told them that I heard those same scratches in my parents' house. I was visiting my mom, and we were having lunch when we heard a loud crash, as if someone knocked things over when breaking in. Armed with a plate and a knife from our lunch, we went in search of what had made that noise, checking the whole house and then the last room, my eldest brother's. We found his superhero action figures had fallen from a shelf and scattered over his bedroom floor. Doesn't sound too bad, but the sound of them falling was far louder than it should have been, and they had been standing there for months without ever falling before, and they haven't since either. While I was sitting on the bed with my back against the wall in the house where I am renting a room, I heard 3 knocks or taps coming from within the wall behind my head, similar to the sound of hitting metal railings with a stick, and shortly after, a piece of hair was brushed back from the left side of my face. I don't have any witnesses to that one, but I have never experienced anything like it since, and there was no fan or open window that could have moved my hair. This one is odd, and if I'm being honest, I'm really not sure it is paranormal, but I'll let you decide that for yourself. Twice at the bottom of the stairs it felt as if my right buttock had been pinched, and once when I was at the top of the stairs. So yeah, it could have been paranormal, or it could have just been a muscle spasm or something. Still very odd, and it only happened on those 3 occasions. All along, these things are happening. I am hearing movement in rooms, cupboards, and wardrobes as if people are walking around or moving things. Of course, when I go to investigate, nothing has ever moved and no one is there. There is a ghost in my flat, and no one believes me. I live alone in a flat in London, a normal council flat. I've lived here for a year now, and small strange things have happened, and I'm not sure where to begin, but I'll begin here. It started with my shower. I woke up one morning to the sound of my shower being on. It's an electric shower, so it is quite noisy. I go in and see that the shower is not turned on at all, but the floor is wet, very wet. I hadn't showered yet or the previous day, so I was confused but didn't think much of it. I also forgot to mention that when I moved in there were 2 notes in my kitchen, weird sketches and writing of a lady saying how crazy the neighbors were and how someone is coming to get her. I've never met my neighbors, and I've lived here for a year now. Anyway, I've had my extension lead on and charging my phone to then find out it wasn't even plugged in. Straps of my bag swaying, yet no draft and my windows closed. Full glasses of water in my kitchen when I haven't poured them because I specifically drink water out of my Starbucks cup. My cat screaming at walls and ceilings. There are many more strange things. I just want someone, hopefully, to find this with similar things happening to them. Anyone? True story. Back in 2010, I was 17, living at my girlfriend's house, her mom's, and her mom was gone to England for a few weeks to visit her husband, who lives there. So I, my girlfriend, my cousin, and my girlfriend's neighbor decided for some reason to try and call ghosts by lighting candles and reading spells off the internet. We just did random ones, and it was all for fun, kid shit everyone does when you're a teenager with friends smoking weed while you have the house to yourself for a couple weeks. At some point we get to the next spell, and we hear noises coming from upstairs, and we aren't too concerned, it just sounds like running back and forth. I didn't realize something was wrong until I looked at my girlfriend, who appeared shocked, and I asked her what was the matter. She then reminded me the neighbors, a wall away, next door are on vacation, and the 2 8-year-old twin boys usually running back and forth making noise aren't even present, so now my heart's in my ass because where are these steps coming from? And at the same time she's telling us this, we hear the steps coming closer to the top of the stairs on the 3rd floor, and all 4 of us jet downstairs from the 2nd to the 1st floor. Remind you we are high as hell and laughing, but personally I was a little half and half, like maybe we're just a little too high, or is this shit really happening? So now we're in my GF's room on the 1st floor, and we were talking about what happened upstairs and just laughing about it until directly above us we hear ducking steps come down from the 3rd to the 2nd floor. Bedrooms are on the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor is the living room where we hang out, and the 1st floor is a furnished basement, aka my GF's room, where we also hang out. My girlfriend and her neighbor observed me and my cousin while we were seated in chairs, then sat on the bed and, laughing, said, "You guys can relax, I know it was you this time." My cousin and I exchanged glances, exclaiming, "No, that wasn't us, we swear," as we desperately pleaded for them to believe us. That's when we heard quick, loud stomping coming down the stairs towards us, and there were no conversations after that. We all immediately got up and went outside through the front door. Her neighbor was terrified at this point and went home, while I, my cousin, and my girlfriend word for word said, "Duck that," and walked 5 miles to my mom's house on the other side of town. The next day we went back to her house, and I was so shook I didn't even want to stay there, but we didn't hear the noises again. We honestly expected to but didn't. We haven't talked about it in a while, as we all split and are in our 30s now, but I can say for sure without a doubt that ghosts and spirits are real. I was about 5 years old and was staying the night at my Nana's house with my older sister. We were sleeping in the downstairs bedroom that was right next to my Nana's room. It was my uncle's room, but he had gone into the army, and so it was empty. It was a queen-sized bed. So my sister and I shared it. I remember feeling fear when we were told we had to turn the lights out and go to sleep, but I didn't know why I felt it. I had never been scared at her house before, and I had many sleepovers there. Now a bit of backstory is, my uncle loved to scare me. He got some kind of weird kick out of it and would often wear a mask or hide in places and jump out to scare me. This is the same uncle's room I was sleeping in. My sister had fallen asleep, and I was doing my best to do the same when I felt this heaviness in the air. Do you know that feeling you get when someone just enters the room? Like you don't have to look to know someone just came in. That's the feeling I got. I looked towards the door but didn't see anything. I pulled the blanket up over my head because, to a 5-year-old, the blankets keep you safe. I was lying under the blanket for quite a while when suddenly I saw it move. I looked over at my sister, and she was perfectly still and sleeping. Then it moved again, and 2 hands appeared at the foot of the bed and reached towards me, and before I could react, I was on the floor. I remember the way the hand felt cold. I jumped up off the floor and back into the bed, and I remember yelling, "Leave me alone, you jerk," and snuggled up close to my sister. I no longer felt like there was someone in the room with me, and eventually sleep won me over, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up later that night because I needed to pee. I got up out of bed and walked around the foot of the bed towards the door. As I reached the foot of the bed, I felt that someone was there again, and I suddenly felt like I was walking into a wall. There was nothing there, but I couldn't walk forward. Then my feet lifted up off the ground, and I started being shaken violently. I couldn't see anything at all. I started hitting the air in front of me and yelling at whatever it was to just leave me alone already, and suddenly I was dropped and my body hit the floor. I stood up, and there was no wall there anymore, and I ran to the bathroom. I came back into the room after using the restroom and climbed over my sister to get to my side of the bed instead of going near the foot of it again. I woke her up to tell her about it and that I was afraid. She stayed awake with me for a bit, but I could tell she didn't believe a word I said. I eventually fell back to sleep again, and nothing else happened that night. The next morning I asked my Nana if my uncle had come home last night, and she looked at me weird and assured me he had not. He was stationed in Japan at the time. I told her about what happened, and she told me it was just a bad dream and not real. I told my mom as well, and she said the same. Just a realistic feeling dream. I am 40 now. So this was 35 years ago, and I still vividly remember it, and I was very much awake. I never slept in that room again after that, so I never experienced anything else like that again. Heard a woman's voice shout my name, never worked out what it was. Okay, this story was quite a few years ago when I was around 15, 22 now. Everything in this story is true, and honestly I'm looking to see if anyone could give insight into what actually happened. I'd prefer for it not to have been a ghost, ha. One night, I was sitting home alone, my parents were away at a meal, and my sister was working nights. Staying at home on a night never bothered me, and just like any other night I was on my own. I went on my PlayStation with my friend. It was late, but not too late, as my parents didn't really stay out past 10 p.m. My friend and I were sitting in a PlayStation party, voice chat for those who don't know, when I heard a woman's voice shout my name, Will, from inside my house. My first thought was that it was my mother, but I knew they weren't back yet, so I assumed I'd misheard something but still froze. Everything changed when my friend said, "I think your mom just shouted for you," without me ever mentioning what I'd heard. This is when my heart dropped, and I explained to him that no one was home. I immediately went onto my phone. At this point, I and my family were sharing locations via the Find Friends app on iPhone, as it allowed my parents to keep track of where I was when I was out in case of emergency. Everyone's locations were as expected. My parents were still at their meal around a 10-minute drive away from the house. My sister was at work 30 minutes away, and it was just me in the house. I decided to go out of my room to search the house with my headset still on so I could speak to my friend in case there was someone, so he could call the police. I found no one. I still don't know what happened. I texted my sister asking if she'd come home. She hadn't. I asked my parents if they'd come home at any point, and they hadn't. After explaining what had happened, my mother tried to tell me that she had come home at some point, but my father told me afterwards they had never actually come home, and she had only told me this so that I wouldn't be scared. I believe my father, as this is something my mother would say to protect me and try to help me relax, and the Find Friends app confirmed they were still at the restaurant. I would greatly appreciate any assistance. I had brushed this story off as a paranormal experience and told it to people over the years. No one's been able to give me an explanation for what could have happened yet. No one ever believes me when I tell this story, so here I go. When I was about 12 to 13, I had a basketball that was white and blue that I had won at an amusement park. Trying to make my basketball cute, I drew hearts all around it with a black Sharpie. The following morning, I woke up to a weird drawing on one of the hearts. Man, I wish I had taken a photo of it. This was 2007. I don't know what or why, but all I can do is describe it. Imagine a heart, inside both sides there were two dots. Coming from the bottom, a tail, and at the top, a halo. In complete disbelief and trying to be the tough girl I thought I was, I scribbled over it with a Sharpie. Later that day, my friend comes over, and we're home alone, and I tell her about it. We both laugh it off and think it's just stupid and weird, but that's it. Jokingly, I rolled it across the hall into my older brother's room. We both saw it go past the door and disappear. Seconds later, he comes rolling back into my room. We kind of screamed, and I went into the kitchen to get a knife and deflated it. I tossed it into the trash bin outside. After that happened, I started hearing stuff in my home, such as groaning, footsteps, and even knocking sounds. I would get woken up in the middle of the night with someone making noise in the kitchen, but when I checked, no one was there. My dog, who I miss very much, barked and growled into my closet a couple times as well. Again. Trying to be tough, I brushed it off. However, there was one day I was home alone, and I was absolutely fed up with the activity going on. I went into my living room and told whatever it was to leave and leave me alone. It did stop a lot after that. Now, You're probably wondering who lives with me, what if it was my brother pranking me, etc. My parents didn't believe anything I told them. My brother was attending a Christian church at the time, and he is not one to joke around with stuff like that, even to this day. I'm not religious, maybe a bit spiritual, but I have no idea what was going on in my early teens. Sometimes I still can't believe what I saw on my basketball. I'm just glad as an adult, I've never experienced anything like that again. I've been seeing a white figure once a year for 11 years, and I'm not the only one. I genuinely don't know what to do or how to explain this. Since I was 10 years old, I've been seeing the same white figure, just once a year, always in June. She never stays long, just a few seconds, and I've seen her in different places, home, different apartments, even on vacation. She follows me, not the location. The first time I saw her was the same day I opened one of those creepy chain emails. Yeah, I know. I am not saying it was because of that, but it freaks me out how the timing lined up exactly. She's always the same, a white silhouette, no facial features, no clothes I can identify, no movement, just standing there, still. I've never gotten an evil feeling from her, but the fact that this has been happening for 11 years. It's deeply unsettling. I've moved houses multiple times, and she always reappears. One year, I didn't see her, but my ex-boyfriend, who doesn't believe in anything paranormal and who I never told about her, casually told me the next morning. I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It looked like there was this white figure sitting on top of you while you slept. He described her exactly as I see her, and I hadn't said a word to him about it. And now, this year, something changed. A few days ago, again, in June, I didn't see her. But I heard her. I was on a video call with my boyfriend, and out of nowhere, we both heard this clear, sharp sobbing sound coming from the hallway, like a woman crying, just for a second. It was loud enough for him to hear it through the call. I've ruled out every rational explanation I could think of. There was nothing and no one there. I've been trying to ignore it for years, but now that it's escalated to sound, I don't know what she wants. I don't know what I should do. If anyone's had similar experiences or knows what this could be, I'd really appreciate any thoughts or advice. This happened about 20 years ago. After my divorce, I kept possession of the house until it was sold. In order to make the mortgage, I took on a roommate. He and I became good friends, and when the house sold, we moved into an apartment together. The place we got was one of 3 apartments in a house that had long ago been converted. The owner was renovating the inside, and ours was the only apartment that was ready to move in. We had the entire second floor. It was a 3-bedroom with a kitchen, bathroom, dining room, and living room. All of the rooms, except the bathroom, had doors that led to the hallway and to the room next to it. In theory, one could run a circle through the entire place. I did some research, and way back in the day, the house was a brothel. Not really sure if this had anything to do with each of the rooms being connected or not. Anyway, we were the only tenants for almost a year, and during that time, a lot of odd things happened. I took the bedroom on the rear side of the apartment, while my roommate, whom I will call Tim, took the foremost. That left the room between us vacant, though this is not important. I had 2 jobs, a day job, and at night, I worked at a local bar/club. Tim only had a day job, and most nights he would come hang at the club with me. Things started off slowly. Tim had an annoying habit of pacing while he talked on the phone. He would walk down the hall, through the kitchen, into the dining room and the living room, and back down the hall. Every damn time. One night, maybe a month after we moved in, I was awakened by the sound of his voice and footsteps. I looked at the clock, and it was well after 1. This happened to be a night that I was not working. I kind of shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, when I saw Tim, I asked him who the hell he was talking to so late. He looked me in the eye and told me to stop messing with him because he had heard me talking and walking. A little more info on the house. It was clearly 2 stories, with a basement. The main door, which was a security door, entered into a short hall that ran next to the staircase leading to our apartment. Immediately to either side of the security door were the doors that opened to the 2- and 1-bedroom apartments. For most of the first year, getting to the basement was a challenge at best. The landlord had pulled the appliances from the 2-bedroom apartment and put them in the short hallway. No one really needed to get to the basement anyway, and if it was absolutely needed, we had to climb over the appliances. The entire house had those interconnected fire alarms too. So if the smoke alarm went off in apartment 1, all of them went off in every apartment. One Saturday we were getting home from the club, and as we pulled into the driveway, we could hear the sound of the smoke alarms going off. We immediately ran up the stairs to our place to make sure there was no fire. An important side note is that, Except for the smoke alarms, neither of the two first-floor apartments had power. We did the whole waving at the alarms in every room to silence them, to no avail. This clearly meant that one of the alarms in one of the other apartments had been triggered. We scrambled over the mess on the lower hall and went down into the basement to find the breaker that controlled the alarms. As soon as I reached the bottom of the stairs, the hair at the back of my neck stood up and I was covered with goosebumps. Tim asked me if I felt it too. When I asked what he meant, he said he was being watched. I agreed. Besides 3 furnaces and 3 hot water heaters, the basement was empty. No place for anyone to hide, though we did circle the items to be sure. We tripped the breaker and silenced the alarm. Turning the breaker back on did not result in the alarms going off again, which they would have done had there been an actual fire. The next day, a Sunday, which meant the landlord would not be over to work, we called him to tell him of the ordeal. He showed up and did a walkthrough inspection of the alarms. No one could figure out why they were going off. He commended us for stopping them, gave us a key to each empty apartment, and left. Sunday night came, and we both went to the club again. Came home to the same thing. This time, instead of heading right to the basement, we entered the other apartments to try and silence the alarms. Nothing we did worked, so we returned to the basement. This went on every night that I worked at the club until the apartments were filled. The nights I had off and we went to bed, no alarms. It was like whatever it was that was triggering them was messing with us. Also, once the 2 downstairs apartments were filled, the alarms never went off again. There was a lot of other activity while we lived there. I still had my class ring at the time. It vanished from inside the small box I used to store that and my spare watch. Just the ring. 10 years later, after I had moved out, the landlord called me to tell me the newest tenant had been in the attic, and my ring was sitting on top of a box that they had put up there when they moved in a year ago. We often heard footsteps and conversations from our apartment and from the empty ones below us. The creepiest thing that had ever happened occurred after he had moved out. I was living in the apartment alone, seeking a new roommate or a smaller apartment. I was awakened by the feeling of something tugging on my foot. I looked around the room, which was well lit because it was around 9 in the morning. I always slept in as late as I could on the days when I did not work my regular day job. I did not see anything until I got to the corner of the room by the door that led to the hallway. It was inexplicably dark, almost as if something was not allowing the light from my curtainless window to find that space. I got out of bed and walked towards it, shivers of cold running up my spine. As I got closer, the darkness gave way to light, and I saw the corner was empty. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I had been dreaming and then not awake enough to actually see the corner. I climbed back into bed, and as soon as I drifted back to sleep, something yanked on my foot, hard enough to actually move my entire body toward the foot of my bed. I sat up and looked at the corner, again shrouded by absolute darkness. At this, I got out of bed and stayed out. I actually left for the day, I was that creeped out. This is a story I have told to a few, and even with Tim corroborating most of it, he was not there for the foot grab, and no one believes us. I have so many stories. One of my favorites, though, is how I went down the stairs as a toddler when no one was watching me. So let's back up a minute first. When I was 3 years old, our house didn't have any stairs. There was no basement, no cellar, no upstairs, nothing at all. We moved across the states when I was 4, and our new house had stairs. It was much bigger, and my bedroom was upstairs. Going up the stairs was very easy for my tiny arms and legs. I simply crawled up like a dog would. I used all 4s. But going back down? Now that was hard. Each step felt as though it was huge. Like above my knees. How do you crawl down that? When my mother was with me, she'd hold my right hand and encourage me to walk down the steps. I remember crying and telling her that I couldn't do it. It was too hard. Mom insisted that after 1 or 2 steps I was doing fine, but she'd still pick me up and carry me down the rest of the way because I'd simply cry and refuse to move. Now Mom, feeling insistent that I knew how to go down the stairs, tended to leave the baby gate unlocked. One morning I woke up before Mom did. I wanted to watch TV before she got me my breakfast. I pounded on Mom's door, and she told me to let her sleep. I said, okay, and sat at the top of the staircase looking down. I was scheming, trying to come up with the easiest, most efficient way to go down the stairs without getting an owie. So scooting on my butt was out. I decided against walking down, for obvious reasons. Short legs. That's when what I thought was a brilliant idea dawned on me. I thought I could simply close my eyes and take a step of faith. I didn't know how to go down the stairs, but God does. So I did. Exactly that. Immediately, with my eyes still closed, I felt these warm, loving, peaceful arms swoop me up and cradle me down the stairs. I was gently placed standing upright on the tile at the base of the stairs. I then opened my eyes, and with delight I shouted, "Magic!" Because everything unexplained is magical when you're 4 years old. I did this several more times before Mom finally got wind that I didn't understand how stairs work. On this occasion, Mom was making lunch in the kitchen when my guardian angel suddenly spun me in the air and, with their hands holding my torso, made me do a cartwheel down a few of the stairs. I opened my eyes to see myself sitting 3 steps from the bottom. Mom came running, screaming my name in a panic. She scolded me for playing on the stairs. I told her I wasn't playing, I was going down them. Then I told her how I was going down the stairs. Mom's face turned as white as the tile. She tried telling me I could break my bones and end up in the hospital, but I had very little understanding of what either of those were. All I knew was the magic that was happening. Not long after that, the baby gate was always locked whenever I was upstairs in my bedroom. Mom wouldn't let me come down the stairs unless I was supervised, something she honestly should have done to begin with, but God was watching out for me. Skip forward a year. We moved again. I am now 5 years old but still hold that same innocent-like mentality. My bedroom was upstairs again, and Mom was lax about watching me go down the stairs. When no one was around, I wondered if an angel would still carry me. I really missed that wonderful feeling. So I closed my eyes and took a step of faith from the top of the stairs. This time the angel carried me halfway. When I opened my eyes, I looked around, confused. I then heard a voice whisper, "You're old enough now to know how to go down the stairs on your own. If you do this again, you will break a bone or 2 in your arm or leg. It will hurt immensely, but you won't die even if you feel like you might. I will still be over you, watching you and protecting you, but you must learn to do things on your own." I was sad to hear that, and I pouted. It was the best stunt I could think of to get close to hugging an angel, and I was just told it was never going to happen again. I sighed and walked the rest of the way down the stairs. I never tried pulling that stunt again. I talked about it a few times to random people when I was little but learned quickly adults don't believe in that kind of stuff. So I largely keep it to myself unless it somehow seems relevant to a conversation. I've had a few. But this one is the most unbelievable, and I haven't shared it before. I worked in a small community in a canyon as a short order cook at the local restaurant. There was one road that went all the way through the town and a store with an adjacent restaurant in the center of the town. There were side streets, but they all stopped where the center store and restaurant area are, which means that if you live north of the store area, the only way to get back is through this road. The same goes for if you are south. This will make sense later. The last hour or 2 of my shift is usually very slow. I spent that time cleaning and restocking things for the next shift and usually got done with about an hour left. As long as nobody comes into the restaurant, I am good to do whatever. So I leave and go across the street to my friend Brad's house. We are hanging out on his front porch, and I see a Jeep with a man driving pull into the parking lot in front of the restaurant. I didn't want to leave and go back and cook for this guy, and this is where things got weird. The man got out of his Jeep, walked up to the door, and put his hand on the doorknob, and I said out loud, at least 200 feet away so that he could not hear me, "Stop." He instantly stopped and paused for a second until I gave him another command. "Turn around and get back in your Jeep." As I said it, he did as he was told. "Start it up and drive back home." Again, he does as he is told. At this point my friend is freaking out, and I am still believing that this is just coincidence, so I decided to give him some commands that didn't make sense in order to prove it to myself. "Turn around and come back towards me." The man is about 3 or 4 house lengths past the restaurant at this point, driving away from us. He does a U-turn and drives back towards us. Brad's house is not directly across the street from the restaurant but at the corner of an adjacent side street. Again, once you go up those side streets, you can't get back to your home on the other side of town, so it would make no sense for him to make a U-turn when he was driving back home and turn down this side street, which would cut him off from getting back home. As the man drove towards us and approached the side street, I said, "Turn down Brad Street." He did so, exactly as I told him. Brad is really losing it now. I had been saying all of this out loud, and I just looked at him and said, "Can you believe that? That was like some Jedi mind trick shit. You saw that, right? Because nobody else is going to believe me if I tell them about it." That was the end of it. The man never came back. Brad and I sat on the porch talking for another 15 minutes before my shift ended and I had to go back to the restaurant and clock out. I don't know what has happened, but I would like to share my experience. Okay, so as much as I can remember, I have had 2 potential humanoid encounters, one when I was only in 4th grade and one just last year. Nobody has ever believed me, so I just want to talk to some like-minded people about my experiences. I do understand that these could be dreams, but there are other things that have accompanied them that are not usual for me. As I said, my first encounter was when I was only in 4th grade. It would have been in 2008, and my house is in a neighborhood not too far from an average town, but we also live very close to a major city in my state, which is something to consider, I guess. Our house was also a bit off the normal road of the neighborhood, right by a small forest, literally 10 meters from my window. I was also fascinated by space and aliens, which may have affected my view of what happened. Anyway, it was a normal night for me, with a 10 o'clock bedtime, so I did my usual routines and went to sleep. I guess it should be noted that I sleep in the basement on a different wing of the house, so anything I do would not be noticed by the rest of my family. I reawakened sometime at night, but I could not open my eyes or move my body. I felt as if I was rising from my bed, and I know that I was at least moving to the other side of my room towards the window, since I have a fan going and could hear myself moving, if that makes sense. I then woke up, sweating, and it felt like I had just gotten off of an adrenaline rush, as well as feeling petrified and as if I was being watched. I stayed up the rest of the night with the lights on, not being able to calm down much. I told family and friends, who of course did not believe me, and they had every reason not to. Eventually I was able to convince myself that this was all in my head, but the encounter I had last year would bring that into question. I know this might not be considered a complete humanoid encounter, but my next experience would change that. So, fast forward to last year, my junior year of high school. I still lived in the same house, but I would go to bed later because, well, I am in high school. Anyway, normal night, went to bed, but I do remember this, waking up in my backyard, again, surrounded by trees of the nearby forest, away from where others could see, and just being full of fear, like I had to run as fast as I could. I sprinted to my back door, almost stumbling over myself, but here is the interesting part. As I was running, I could see glowing eyes in the darkness of the woods. I think they were watching me run, and they made me panic even more. When I reached my door, I woke up in my bed just like the last time, sweating buckets and feeling like the worst thing in the world had just happened to me. Only this time I felt like I was out of breath as well. It did not hit me until I was driving to early morning swim practice that it was strikingly similar to the event so many years ago, as well as feeling more real. It makes me wonder if these creatures have taken me more times besides this, or if these creatures are just in my head. If they are dreams, they have felt way more real than any dream I have had. Sorry if this is not humanoid enough, but it seems like a nice community that is willing to listen. I still don't know what happened to me, if anything, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and answer any questions you may have. If you have made it this far, thank you for listening. My dad's experience with a, probably, malicious entity. I don't know if this is the best place to share this, because most of it didn't happen directly to me but to my dad a few years ago. This may lead some people to doubt my account, but I am familiar with his workplace and fully believe him. So he has been working in a pretty old mansion as a guardian for probably over a decade. It's not completely isolated from the rest of the world, it is in a little neighborhood outside of the city, so we can say it's sort of private. The mansion's owners are wealthy individuals who visit for about a month each summer, leaving him as the sole occupant most of the time. As the guardian, he has a small apartment on the property where he sleeps. Some other people work, like cleaners or gardeners, but in winter they just come by every once in a while during the day. While working there with him, my mom and I had seen or heard a presence multiple times. For example, we heard footsteps in empty areas and witnessed doors or cabinets opening. One time, my mom and dad even saw the heavy door of a well outside the house open on its own, which is impossible without assistance, as well as lights turning on unexpectedly. Like once, I, my mom, and my little brother were in the garden. It started to get dark, so we went to turn on the lights, but while walking towards the switch, the lights just turned on by themselves, right in front of our eyes. My parents believe in this kind of thing, and I am a pretty spiritual person, so we are pretty sure there is some sort of entity, but clearly not a malicious one. Just a ghost, or maybe more than one, who knows, who enjoys living in the house and has never hurt or bothered anybody. However, we believe that my dad may have encountered a malicious entity there at one point. One night, he was awake in bed on his phone and saw a strong light from outside. When he went to check, he told me it was like somebody was in a car with the headlights on, right in front of the gate. A few times, robbers have attempted to break into the house. Although it is just a vacation home with no valuable items inside, it is still a mansion, which attracts robbers. He ran outside to check, as it is literally his job, but when he opened the door, he saw a tall black figure in the garden of the mansion walking towards a tree. So then my dad panicked. I remember he called my mom around like midnight and ran home. The next day, he was so scared that he had to take my mom to check on the house, where they saw large footprints, larger than usual, on the pebbles. Outside, sorry, I don't really know how to explain, and it seemed like the pavement in front of the gate was burned, like you could see burn marks on the floor. In the first few days after this event, he refused to tell me anything about it, since I was a kid and it would have probably freaked me out. However, my mom, being nosy, shared all the details with me, which I found amusing. To solve this, my mom ended up giving him some crucifixes, like one to wear and one to put on the wall. I'm atheist, and my family is not very religious, but somehow it worked. I don't believe this entity was the same one that is still now in the mansion, since it was clearly malicious and wanted to scare my dad or worse. The other ghost is still there, walking around the house and opening doors, but I'm sure she doesn't mean any harm. I don't know how to get rid of it, please help me. Ever since I was 10, I've experienced strange paranormal events in my old family house and during trips, apparitions, objects disappearing, voices, sleep paralysis with terrifying visions, and even seeing auras. I'm 17 now, and it keeps intensifying. I don't know how to handle it anymore, and I'm looking for advice. It all started a few years ago, when I was in 5th grade. I went through a trauma when my grandmother was suffering from depression during her divorce with my grandfather. She was not doing well and was watching a lot of dark, morbid things. During a vacation at her house, when I was alone with her, she forced me to watch paranormal videos with her. Since that day, I still have visions of that footage. I was never able to sleep the same way again. When I got back home, I slept with the light on for over 3 months. And then I started seeing a little boy near my bedroom door, a few meters away from my bed. It was just a dark shadow, but as I often say, I saw, and I just knew. I knew he was harmless, so I eventually stopped worrying. For context, I live in a house that is nearly 165 years old, and I am the only one in my family who has kept some of its old furniture, like 2 large wardrobes around my bed, as well as a beautiful mirror with its vanity, though my mother has always refused to hang it up. Needless to say, this house has seen a lot of people come and go. There have even been births in my brother's room and deaths in mine. One day, during the lockdown, I experienced the first real paranormal phenomenon in the house. All my windows were closed, no draft, my door shut, and the AC off when suddenly a Nerf dart refill placed on a shelf started moving by itself for no reason. The strange part was that it only lifted up from one side and moved left to right, like a compass needle. I managed to film it and showed it to my mother, who didn't believe me. I even moved the object several times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. For several months, nothing happened. Then, within the span of a year, my mother, my brother, and I each lost a personal item under very mysterious circumstances. My mother left her earrings on her nightstand, and they vanished. She searched everywhere, on the floor, under the bed, behind it. Nothing. My brother lost the handwritten manuscript of a novel he was writing, something very precious to him, and it just disappeared. I also lost an object of mine, though I can't remember exactly which one. I should mention that I am a practicing Catholic, though I don't go to Mass as often as I would like. During a Catholic camp, while attending Mass, I saw my guardian angel in the flames of a candle. There wasn't any particular form, but again, I saw, and I just knew. I saw this same angel again in the flame of a candle given to me at Christmas a few months ago. I've always been sensitive to the paranormal, even before I really began to believe in it, something that has only truly happened in recent weeks. The paranormal activity began intensifying about a year ago, maybe a little more. My bedroom door opens systematically when I'm inside, but when anyone else is in the room, it strangely stays shut. When I'm home alone, doors slam on their own, even though there are no drafts. I mysteriously lost numerous personal belongings in 2024 and 2025, despite consistently keeping them in the same location. I eventually found them hidden inside the lining of my brother's old suitcase, unused for years, while I was packing for vacation. The suitcase was on top of a sliding wardrobe in the attic, which has been fully renovated. It's like a second floor, and you need a chair to reach it. Another time, while watching a movie, 2 heavy sliding doors separating my living room from the upstairs bathroom suddenly opened and closed extremely fast on their own. The strange thing is that the doors are so heavy I can't even open them by myself. Not long after that Catholic camp, I went on vacation to Guadeloupe and had my first sleep paralysis. That night, there were constant power outages, and a phone in the house kept ringing nonstop. I've always had a deep fear of the dark, but I gathered my courage and unplugged the phone. My mother joined me at that exact moment, doing the same thing. I went back to bed and began feeling a heavy oppression before falling asleep. That's when I had an absolutely horrible nightmare. I was trapped in a bed that was being folded shut. I eventually woke up, but that's when the real nightmare began. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, and I was paralyzed on my back. In front of my bed was a dazzling, glowing white figure surrounded by yellow light. And again, I saw, and I just knew. It was a fallen angel. Who exactly? I have no idea, but that night I came closer to pure terror than I ever had in my life. The angel advanced toward me, moved to my left, and headed for the entrance of my mosquito net. That's when I woke up a second time. For the first time ever, my mother actually believed me. Later, we went on a family retreat to Paranormal with the Emmanuel community. We stayed in a shabby, overpriced hotel. The moment I stepped into the room I was to share with my brother, I felt uneasy, really uncomfortable. The first night passed without much, just some noises from the bathroom. But the second night was far worse. In the middle of the night, I felt someone sit on my mattress next to me. Whatever it was so heavy that my body actually tilted toward it. Strangely, I didn't feel anything emotionally at that moment, but when I pulled at my sheets, the weight would disappear and then return again. I know it wasn't my brother because he was sleeping in another bed, and there was no one beside me. The next day, I went to see a priest giving a lecture on occultism. I didn't know it at the time, but what he said would awaken a flood of memories. He spoke about demonic possession and its symptoms, and everything he described matched what I had been experiencing. Afterward, I went to talk to him, and he recommended the prayer of the brothers. It proved very effective, especially the Canticle of Zechariah. For the past 3 weeks, I've been reciting that canticle before bed and praying a lot to Mary as well. During the prayer of the brothers, the woman praying over me asked the Lord to visit me that night, and he did. When I attempted to close the window, a butterfly entered, but it was not a moth, it was a vivid white, almost luminous. I tried to put it outside several times, but it kept coming back. Finally, it landed next to my bed, and that night I slept 2 more hours than usual, 6 hours instead of 4. I began to sleep better in the days after. Up until then, I had been sleeping terribly, terrified every night. When I returned home, I felt a presence in my bed again, but less strong. A few nights later, I saw a transparent sheet gently laying itself over me, like a protective blanket. The following week, we went camping, and at first everything was fine. Then my period started, with much stronger pain than usual, so severe that I had to be carried to my bed. While my parents and brother went to the pool, I remained to rest, and that was when it resumed. I heard footsteps above me, though there was no second floor. This phenomenon also happens in my attic at night. Around bedtime, I eventually fell asleep, only to wake up facing the wall, unable to move or scream. I felt the mattress sink behind me, as though someone was lying down. This sleep paralysis was worse than the first one. I felt nothing but terror, and it was painful. My whole body hurt, especially my legs, arms, and back. Honestly, I think the only reason I didn't lose my sanity was because I didn't see anything this time. The rest of the trip passed normally. But since returning home, phenomena have been everywhere. Objects falling in my room, my door refusing to close when I'm inside, footsteps above me in the attic, and most recently voices. I hadn't spoken about this until now because it's so recent. But I seem to have developed a kind of gift. It's as if I can read certain people, because the voices give me information. All I need is to look at someone to know what they're truly like deep down, behaviorally, and sometimes even what they've lived through. I don't fully know how to explain it. My mother and brother also have this sensitivity, but they don't experience paranormal events, only an ability to sense people. During the retreat, a woman was sharing how she became a consecrated virgin at a Marian evening, and I saw something around her, a violet orb, like an aura. During that same trip, I began seeing people's auras again, 3 or 4 of them, and these ones were yellow. I think the Virgin Mary was with that woman that night. These phenomena began when I was 10. I'm 17 now, and I'm becoming more and more sensitive. I just know that when I was younger, I must have left a door open, and something must have entered, and maybe it wants to behold me. Since the experiences have intensified, I've also developed serious health problems, IBS, PCOS, vitiligo, me and my teeth, severe allergies, etc., which have weakened me. So, these are my paranormal stories. But the truth is I don't really know how to handle these situations anymore. Do you have any advice for me? Demon at a friend's house. Looked around the corner by the hallway at him and me. All shadowed out, but it was somehow still clear as day. We legit thought someone came in through the back or something. Sounds like some BS, I know. I don't even believe in that kind of stuff. But everything about it was just too clear. I had never believed they show like that. The thing must have had nothing better to do at that moment than check on us. Imagine that dude. Being some kind of entity able to go wherever and do whatever, and this duck just decided to check on me and my friend playing Mortal Kombat. What was the point of all that? I say demon because I don't believe in ghosts. You never believe in this kind of stuff till shit happens. I'll never forget that kind of boom. Heavy feeling in my chest when I looked at it and saw my friend look at it too. It is looking back straight at us. That was what sold it. My friend looked at it a second later than I. It was for a solid 4 ducking seconds. The longest 4 seconds of my life. Hey everyone, I have a story to tell that has bothered me daily since childhood, and I can't get it off my mind. I'm 17, almost 18 next month, and I have had many experiences with the supernatural, and as a child I often would stay awake all night hearing noises around me. Let me start off. I grew up in London, UK, but originally I am from Punjab, India, and I was also born there but came to the UK when I was 3, so I basically grew up here. In my culture there are many people who tend to do black magic, and they do it around the Indian festival of Diwali, not to ward off dark spirits, but to bring them. Often, they will leave candles to burn in the middle of the street, and it is believed that anyone who is passing by will have all the sins of the person who placed the candle put onto them, meaning the other person has the passerby sacrifice for their pleasure. This is an actual event that I experienced when I was 8. It doesn't really have anything to do with Diwali or black magic, but I was staying at my grandparents' residence in India during summer holidays, and I remember that my dad was staying over at his friend's place. It was midnight, around 11 p.m., and everyone was asleep except me. The only other people in the house were my grandpa, who was paralyzed due to a stroke, my grandma, and my cousin sister. I couldn't sleep that night since I had overeaten during dinner. I was a chubby kid, and I decided to walk some laps in the corridor of the small bungalow. As I tiptoed out of the room where my grandma and I were sleeping, I was surprised to see her standing in the corner by an old chair, bewildered, because I thought she was fast asleep in the room. When I peeked back inside, she was still sound asleep. My mind began to race, and I felt like I was going to faint. When I looked back to the corridor, my grandma was still standing near the fridge, smiling. I decided to remain quiet since I didn't want anyone to wake up and get angry at me for still being awake, so I decided to walk towards the figure. The figure, which seemed to look like my grandma, started to speak and say, "You want to come and play with the dolls?" while standing on the balcony. I was so surprised that my grandma was saying that since she was always too tired or busy to play with me, so I agreed. We walked to the balcony where we could view the rest of the town. It was pitch dark and all the street vendors had long gone home. I looked down the street and saw the house next to us. There had been an old couple who lived there but had died when I was around 2 and it was abandoned. But what caught my eye was that my grandma was standing in their garden, waving and screaming at me to jump from the balcony, and she promised to catch me in time. I began to panic and I was about to jump off when I remembered that this was not my grandma and I was probably just dreaming, so I decided to walk back down. As I was walking back into the house, I felt something grab the back of my collar. I turned around and it was my grandma, but this time it didn't sound like her. She was screaming at me for not doing as she said and that I was going to be punished. I used my quick instincts and what I'd learnt from horror movies that I had watched, which were all 18 plus, and I decided to run back into the house and wake up my real grandma. Obviously when I got back in I could still feel the presence of the entity, but my grandma was just not waking up and was in such a deep sleep. I decided to lie back in bed. Despite all that had happened, I was just about to close my eyes and doze off when I saw something standing near the cabinet. With its limbs contorted and tongue out, it had long hair and a blue face. I tried not to scream. It looked exactly like what I perceived to be a chudale, an Indian female ghost. I don't know what happened after that, but I somehow just fell asleep, and I haven't told anyone I know about this since that day because I know no one would believe me. I had a lot of weird experiences in my old house. I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, demons, or whatever. One of them was this dream I had. I swear it's a dream, but it was so vivid, and I remember it so well that I don't know. First, I felt as if I had woken up in my room, which was on the ground floor and had a window to the patio. Everything was dark, the only thing I could see was the window, and the shadow of a man wearing a hat was outlined on it. I dreamt that I got up, grabbed a little axe I had back then, and went to make sure the door was closed and that nobody was actually inside the patio, and maybe called the police. As soon as I got close to the window, and through the closed curtains, I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me. I then heard a big crashing noise and felt as if I had woken up again, but this time back in my bed, and I couldn't move. You know, sleep paralysis. I turned my eyes to see towards the window, looking for the man in the hat, and I couldn't make him out anymore, but the inside of my room had a dark reddish glow, and I saw the shadow of something the size of a toddler dancing around my bed. I started to tense up, but I had been watching Supernatural and thought, what would Dean Winchester do? And answered myself that he would punch the shadow. The shadow toddler got near my right hand. I felt it brushing it gently, but I still punched it with my other hand. Then I actually woke up, gasping, both arms and legs numb at first, and feeling cold as duck. I started moving my hands, I was stiff as duck, and when I could move, I was sore all over. I got up, went to pee, and tried to fall asleep again. I still don't know what the duck it was, but it's the most scared I've ever felt. My parents' house is haunted, but they won't accept it, even though the ghost affects us all. This will take a lot of backstory and explaining, but it's worth it. This is one of many stories I have. Growing up, we lived in a few different homes. This story is about the current house my parents live in. My parents' houses has always been haunted. I have always been sensitive to ghosts for as long as I can remember. Every house we have lived in has been haunted, and I have been haunted, and a few of those ghosts are attached to me still. Even though I've moved out, things still occur. Most of the ghosts attached are good. I make sure of it, so don't worry. Anywho, backstory time. I will probably be referencing multiple houses, so I'm going to name the current house they live in the Shelby house. When I was younger we lived in the same neighborhood they live in now. We moved out of our first house and moved to a couple of different houses, and now my parents are living in the same original neighborhood I grew up in. It is a house a few houses down from our first house. The Shelby house has had a few different owners, and being a small town, we knew most of the owners. Well, the previous owners, Thomas and Grace, fake names for privacy, were a couple with an empty nest. I'm not sure how long they owned the house before us, but they were the couple that my parents bought the house from. They aren't there now, but when we moved in, the mailbox and the curb across from it had rose bushes at the end of the driveway. They have been there for a while. As I said, we knew some of the previous owners of this house, so the rose bushes were there since I was a kid. I remember seeing them when we would go visit sometimes. Now, the driveway is horrendous, it is so hard to get out of. That's very important in the story. Back to the story, there were a lot of different incidents of this happening, to the point Grace would make jokes to us about it. When my parents bought the house, Grace said, "Be careful of the rose bushes, they're cursed. The roses caused Thomas to die." She made some joke like, "Just make sure you don't run over the roses," and laughed. My parents are super religious, so they didn't believe her, they don't believe in ghosts or curses, etc. Well, every time someone related to Thomas and Grace, themselves, friends, family, or anybody, ran over the rose bush on the curb opposite to the mailbox, they would have the worst luck for, like, an entire week, and the people would tell Thomas and Grace about it. Now, this is where the story takes a turn. Thomas ran over the rose bush one day, and a week later he sadly had a heart attack and died inside the house. That's what leads Grace to sell the house to my parents. It's important to note that Thomas was 6 feet 0 inches. I have no idea if other previous owners had stuff happen to them because of the rose bushes. Okay, now to how the roses took effect on my family. We hadn't even lived in this house for a month, and my father accidentally ran over the rose bushes one day. That week he got some rare type of food poisoning, went septic in the middle of the night, and had to be rushed to the hospital. He passed out at home while in the kitchen and fell and broke his ribs because he hit the floor so hard. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived. He was in the hospital for at least 2 months or more and also had to have some type of surgery. Then my mother ran into the rose bush on her way to work, and she had someone rear-end her. Everyone was fine in the crash, but still, like, WTF? So after those two things happened, my parents decided to take the rose bushes on both sides up and just replant different flowers. My parents were too busy to do it, so they told my brother-in-law and sister to do it. My Bill's mother helped them. They all had bad luck and had catastrophic things happen to them for almost a month. Can't remember what they were because it was one after another almost every single day. They replanted different flowers, and the new flowers also died immediately. No matter how many flowers my family replanted, they would all die. Now, I lived in that house for about a year or so before I moved out. I would always hear footsteps and voices when no one was home. I always had nightmares of me being haunted and possessed and bad things happening to my family. I would constantly have sleep paralysis. I was so afraid of having nightmares that I either couldn't sleep at all, slept in my car, or took naps when I came home from school around lunchtime. Well, one day I was home alone and eating lunch in the living room while on the phone with my boyfriend at the time, Owen. From the couch, you can see into my room and the hallway at pretty much any angle. I was on FaceTime with Owen and watching GMM like every day when I got home from school around lunch. I remember I was eating ramen, and all of a sudden I saw this 6-foot dark figure just walk into my room from the hallway, and then I heard someone go into my room. I saw my door open. And I said, "Owen, I think someone is in my house," and he said, "Okay, go get the pew-pew and stay on the phone." If something happens, I will call the cops. I grab a knife from the kitchen, and I walk into my room, and I check it out, and my brother's room, and the bathroom, and no one is there. A couple of days go by, and the same thing happens. It kept happening, so I told my brother about it, and he said the same would happen to him. The day I moved out of that house, all the nightmares of me having possessions and being haunted and bad things happening to my family and sleep paralysis stopped. My brother tells me he has them now, and most nights he won't sleep in the house, he'll go to my sister's and sleep. Every time I go to my parents' house now, I go home with a giant migraine, and I just feel like my entire energy was drained out of me.